So let me pause the music here. Audio back. So here it is. First headline of the day. Apple announces winners of the 2021 Apple Design Awards. 6 new award categories recognize developers around the world for innovation, visual and graphics, interaction, design, delight and fun, inclusivity, and social impact. One such winner is an app called Voice Dream Reader. Voice Dream Reader is the best-in-class text-to-speech app that reads text aloud from just about any digital source, whether it's a PDF, web page, or ebook, in more than a dozen languages, and that's super cool. A few other apps like Hollow Vista and a game called Puk Puk Playroom from Belgium, Little Orpheus from the United Kingdom, which looks truly fantastic. I'm going to tweet this article to the Tech News Twitter account, which you can find at TNATW on Twitter. And you'll just scroll down a few hours ago and you'll see the Apple announces winners of the 2021 Apple Design Awards. And what's interesting is right down, by the way, do look at these apps that win all of these awards that Apple is giving out. Basically, Apple has millions and millions of apps in the App Store. And they, in this awards, are awarding their very favorite, absolute favorite handful of apps out of the millions of apps in the App Store. So please understand how special it is to be chosen by Apple to be the best, what they feel are the best apps in the App Store, right? You can understand this is a truly big honor. And one of these apps is, lo and behold, from Denmark by a gentleman named Hans-Jørgen Weiberg called Be My Eyes. And Hans-Jørgen Weiberg happens to be on stage, as he is most days with us here, or often in the audience at Tech News Around the World. So a huge Tech News Around the World congratulations to Hans for winning and being selected as one of Apple's best designed apps of 2021, and a very well-deserved it is. And I just want to say, I told you so, everybody. When Hans first stepped on the stage here, I don't know, a month or two ago, and I said, holy shit, is this who I think it is? And I got emotional, y'all. Y'all heard me crying here on Tech News Around the World that Mr. Hans Weinberg had joined the stage, because this app is so tremendously touching and moving and profoundly beautiful and thoughtful and just beyond inspirational. And so, as I've said many times, it's an honor to have you on the stage and in the room, to share the room with you, Hans. And I couldn't be more proud that Apple has selected you as one of the best apps of 2021, as they damn well should, by the way. Your innovation is fantastic, and I'm glad to think that it's not me. I said, you heard me say a month ago, out of all the millions of apps in the store, I think this is one of the best apps in the store. And now Apple is saying it. God damn it. I couldn't be happier, Hans. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And what makes me really proud is that the category is social impact, which is exactly what we are trying to do, and have Apple, who does know about social impact, have them say that we are actually doing a good job is, that's absolutely tremendous. But also the fact that it is a design award. My whole team is really, really excited about that. It's a wonderful, wonderful feeling. Thank you so much for mentioning that. That's just wonderful.
How could we not, sir? And Danes take design very, very seriously, and they are very, very and rightfully proud of their incredible design work. And it's you absolutely should visit Denmark. And one of the first things you'll notice within a few hours of being there is how serious they take design about, you see it everywhere, particularly in the interior design and the furniture, and so you're right. It's not. It is a design award, and I bet your Danish colleagues are very proud indeed.
Absolutely.
As they should be. And by the way, so Trust, who's next to you on stage, we were talking about this in the previous meeting when we met 6 or 7 hours ago. We read this headline when it first broke. And we said, "Oh my God, where's Hans? Because you're normally here." But for once you weren't there. And Trust was like, "What? You guys know this guy?" We're like, "Yeah, we know this guy. He joins us all the time." And so Trust is next to you on stage, and he's a fan and a user of your app in Nigeria, if I remember correctly. Trust, where are you at?
Yeah. Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria to be specific. And when I heard the news, I was really excited because I think I started using the app, I think 2020, or is it 2020 or earlier than that? I think so. And I saw it. I'm like, this is a great app. I started using it, and it was really awesome. And I've been like, okay, because I do check out the awards every time and time again. Funnily, I was discussing with someone 2020, I think late 2020, and now we're like talking about accessibility apps that probably should get more recognition. And you, of course, the Be My Eyes app was among the conversation, and then the some other apps. So I'm like, okay, then I didn't catch up with the news. I was just here and I heard the news. I'm like, whoa, and I was, and it was really exciting, and I was really how you doing, Hans? How is it doing?
I'm doing great, absolutely. What also really, yeah, makes me happy is that Apple is putting so much focus on accessibility, and not only for blind people. They do really try to make their products accessible for a number of different issues, handicaps, whatever you want to call it. And that is just so amazing because it is such a huge group of people out there. So we really need the big companies to yeah, focus on this and help us spread the awareness and basically make it possible for people with some kind of handicap to use the products. That's the first kind of barrier before we can start make any apps that for our group of people is it's a must that they can actually use the hardware in the first place. So that's also super
Yeah,
encouraging for people like me. So thank you.
clearly, Apple has really done a lot for accessibility, and that's why we hope that other OS and other hardware producing companies can actually emulate. Yeah, although yeah, Apple have a lot to still cover on up, but yeah, we with Apple we know that there is the effort and there's the conscious effort to ensure that they improve on it, which is awesome. Anyways, I just followed you, Hans, and I will really appreciate you follow back, and maybe we can have further conversations. It's really a pleasure speaking with some the brilliant mind behind Be My Eyes. It's really awesome, Hans. I really love to have further conversations with you moving forward around app development and all of those. Really awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yep. A whole bunch of other interesting headlines to get into here for the next few hours. And
Sorry, Tyler, and
what's
thanks
up,
to
Chris?
everybody for. I say sorry. Thanks to everybody
No.
also for, of course, the opportunity to meet Hans and as
Yeah.
well being here. Thanks everybody.
Yeah. Thank you for being here, and you were brilliant in our last meeting a few hours ago, which everyone can see our schedule by clicking on the title of the room, where you'll see the Tech News Club, which we do hope you follow, and notice all of the other upcoming what we call deep dive rooms. In addition to the Tech News Around the World room, that where we meet twice a day, we also have most of the people on stage at this point do their own deep dive rooms and are fantastic moderators in their own right of various rooms and regular participants. And very notably, Justin, who does the Media and Politics 101 room that most of us just came from, actually, which is easily my favorite room aside from Tech News Around the World, because it's essentially political news around the world. And I learn a tremendous amount every day by the brilliant political minds who jump in from all over the world. And what a fantastic, I mean, I think we both feel indebted to Clubhouse for even this fantastic framework that enables us to do this format of bringing intelligent, intellectually curious folks from all over who aren't afraid of a little healthy debate from time to time when need be. That's part of the process, and we got to challenge each other on our assumed truths, and that's certainly true. And you can't. It's hard to even talk about politics without doing that. And us as geeks, this is our sport, this is our politics, this is all of this tech stuff. And so do follow Justin on stage. Justin, what was for you was the big takeaway, the big political takeaway today in the politics
Yeah,
media 101?
so I just wanted to piggyback in. Your community is so great. I obviously love my rooms the most, but your rooms are a close second. I think that to kind of put a point on it, right? We do get into vigorous debate here, both in this room and the other room. And in the moment, it sucks when I am corrected and forced to look at a new issue in a new perspective. But when I look back on it, I think that that's the most valuable thing here, right? We're learning about the tech news on the ground in the country from somebody who is in that area, which is super cool. For us, though, Tyler, after putting a fine point on that, I think the big news, and this is very different than tech news, folks, is President Biden is meeting with President the Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, and this meeting will have global reverberations throughout many different sectors. Right now, Turkey's in economic calamity, but as people know, especially in Europe, this meeting is vital. As the United States begins to pull out forces from Afghanistan, NATO allies and the EU are basically depending upon Turkey to maintain security and prevent the Taliban from retaking the area. In addition to that, Turkey plays directly into how both the EU and the United States approach Russia, because Turkey's kind of that middle player, and there's just so much more. So the point of the news was, can President Biden, can Erdogan kind of meet together, shake some hands, smooth some things over, and have Turkey be a willing partner for those issues, and then also maybe most importantly for Europe, for the Syrian refugee crisis? Will Turkey begin to step up their game and essentially help stem the tide of immigration into the EU and take off some pressure that is happening culturally, socially, economically, based on that Middle Eastern crisis? So that would be my big takeaway, Tyler.
Cool. Well, thank you, Justin. And like I said, follow Justin and join his rooms, which are right before this room, and it goes for 2 hours. You'll see me there. You'll see most of the people on stage there, soaking up all of the important political news. And then a lot of folks from that room, we jump in here and we get into the tech news. And here's one that bridges the gap about Nigeria and Twitter. And thanks to the folks who are tweeting this in right now. And what I mean by that is they are tweeting from their Twitter accounts this link that I just tweeted out from our Tech News Around the World Twitter account. So they tweet it. They include our Twitter account as part of their tweet. So I get a notification. And then with a single click, I retweet them to our ever-growing list of beautiful community members who follow the Twitter account, TNATW. Which we highly encourage you to do it as well. And while we talk about every headline here on stage, we are simultaneously tweeting out the links so you can read the full articles and do the deep dive yourself. And simultaneously, we have people like Poppy and Radeja and others on stage, and Amanda and Cal. A lot of people in the audience and on stage are finding related articles to what we discuss and sharing them in real time to enrich the conversation. And it's a very cool accidental innovation that has come about here that we do here. And now Justin's doing over there at the Political News. So this headline that's happening right now about Nigeria's Twitter account, the growing beef between Nigeria and Twitter is escalating. And it started a couple days ago when Twitter blocked some of the tweets of the Nigerian presidency. And that got them upset. And so the Nigerian president decided to ban Twitter in Nigeria. And now the new headline coming from CNN that I just tweeted out is Nigeria's Twitter ban leaves Nigerian businesses in the lurch. Lagos-based entrepreneur was selling more than 500,000 naira, which is about $1,200 worth of watches and shoes and handbags on Twitter per week. Now, with Twitter suspended by the Nigerian government, the entrepreneur does not know how she will cope. And she says, social media is where I eat, she told Reuters. I depend on social media for my livelihood. Scores of small and medium-sized businesses across Africa's most populous nation and largest economy, Nigeria, are reeling from the indefinite suspension of Twitter. In Nigeria announced the suspension on June 4th, days after the platform removed a post from President Buhari that threatened to punish regional separatists. And that was Twitter's explanation of why they removed it, is because it was threatening in a physical way, which they say violates its terms of service. And then The point of the article essentially is that just a deep dive into the impact that this is having on many of the people, entrepreneurs around Nigeria who are dependent on Twitter for their livelihoods, for their business, as social media is becoming more. And my God, is this an absolutely, there's far more to this than it meets the eye. Okay, that's nice. This lady can't sell her watches or her shoes in Nigeria because of a Twitter ban, but hold the phone, y'all. Hold the fucking phone. Because if you've been with us for more than a minute, y'all, you know that there's this amazing, huge, game-changing, I would dare even say world-shaking new thing happening called social commerce. And what is social commerce? Well, I'm glad you asked, Cowboy. Social commerce is the combination of social media and e-commerce. And we've talked about the origins of it in China from a company called Pinduoduo, how it's been sweeping across the east, heading westward as a tidal wave of innovation. It's now in India, and it's now in the past few days reached our shores. And Instagram has now shown screenshots of what it will look like and how it will function on Instagram. This was in the past, 3 or 4 days. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, all of them, including Netflix, 48 hours ago, just announced they're going to have an e-commerce store built into Netflix now. And basically any social site of any kind is going to add in e-commerce. What does that look like? Well, when you're on Instagram now, those Instagram influencers that you follow are not going to just be, and TikTokers are not just dancing silly dances just for clicks and likes and hearts. They're dancing and selling products. And the products in their videos will be clickable for sale. And they will make money from that, just as they are in Asia now. And it's a tremendously, wildly, unimaginably big business. Why do I mention that? Because this lady who's selling shoes in Nigeria, now that Twitter's banned in Nigeria, her business is gone. Yeah, well, not that many people are making a business on Twitter, unless you realize in the very, very near future, more and more and more and more people are going to be making their business on TikTok and Instagram and all of these platforms because of social commerce. It's going to become incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important. And now think this through. If you get banned from Twitter and Twitter is where your store exists, or Instagram is now encouraging everyone to create their stores in Instagram and because you as a small business, okay, you can't sell on Amazon, right? You're not big enough to sell on Amazon. And Instagram says, no problem, fam, we got you covered. Make your little shop over here on Instagram. And then you're going to say, yeah, Instagram, but I don't have any followers. And they're going to say, hold up, dog, we got you covered yet again, because we're going to match you up with all of our very popular influencers here on Instagram. And they can sell your products and they will get a small piece of the sale just for pushing them to your little store that nobody knows about here in Instagram. And just like Facebook made it super, super, super simple for you and all of your family and your cousins and every idiot you went to high school to get on the internet and make a little page for themselves, they're going to make it super, super simple for your crazy aunt and uncle to build their little flower shop and shoe shops on Facebook and on Instagram and, on these social commerce sites. Now, what happens when Aunt Betsy, she loves Trump, and what happens when she starts talking about, COVID and she gets deplatformed and bye-bye flower shop? I mean, it's one thing to get deplatformed, and people are getting deplatformed left and right because they're violating their COVID policies because they said something about some vaccine that violates the policies, or they said something about Trump, or, this, that, or the other. Next thing you know, Aunt Betsy's off of Facebook. And that's okay now when, there's nothing but likes and clicks. But what happens when she's got her business on Facebook and on Instagram, and then they ban her for saying something that doesn't fit with their policies? You see where I'm going? So I didn't realize this until I read this article, how big social commerce is. And I wonder how
that's a new add to the whole thesis, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah. We've been talking about this thesis, but this is a new add to it.
This is a implication
on small businesses.
That's right.
They start making a living, and the implications of the ban on those people and the political, motivations that will drive, right?
Or you're a Twitter. Or here's another example. You're a big Twitter influencer, and you're monetizing your audience on Twitter. And by the way, Twitter's got a whole bunch of new features they just announced in the last week. One of them's called ticketed Twitter Spaces, where people are going to pay to join. Yeah. Evan has a huge following on Twitter, by the way. And so let's use it. Evan, do you mind if we just used your name as an example, just to highlight how important this is?
No, I've been suspended on Twitter a couple of times due to copyright infringement issues, which I sorted out. But
I have a dear friend on stage who's been banned from Twitter, who can reveal themselves if they wish to, and they're not the only one. But by the way, who joins us regularly on the stage who have been banned by Twitter. So just to highlight the point, Evan has a tremendously big following on Twitter. Evan can very soon start monetizing his influence on Twitter by selling tickets to join him into conversations in the rooms, by selling products and services on Twitter where he'll get a cut, by writing articles now because they're going to compete with Substack on Twitter. So is Facebook, by the way. So he could, start writing articles about how he feels about all of Apple's new upcoming products and yada yada, and get paid for that. But if he gets banned or suspended, bye-bye business.
Tyler,
So
I just took an article about social commerce privacy
I'll check it out.
from China.
Yeah, this is my point. Now, what if Evan's in India? What if it's Akhil in India? And Akhil didn't say nothing wrong. Akhil's just doing his jam, selling his mama's curry on Twitter.
I just entered the room, Tyler. I don't think I did anything.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's not even people. This is the algorithm banning me. When I was suspended, it wasn't a person at Twitter. It was the algorithm saying, okay, you did something wrong. It was a mistake. And now your Twitter account's gone. So
right.
And of course, there's no customer service. There's no support number.
Right.
It's completely automated.
But what happens when Akhil is just doing his thing, selling his mama's curry? And by the way, his mama makes the most amazing curry you've ever had, and it's blowing up all over Delhi. And then Modi pisses off Jack Dorsey, and next thing you know, Modi's telling Dorsey to get out of India, which he very will likely to do, just as Nigeria just did. And now there's 100,000 businesses that just poof.
It'll be really interesting to see what happens in countries where social commerce is already somewhat thriving. So, because I would imagine that these platforms are going to charge a commission, right? So on the one hand, it might be attractive for them to kind of port over to the mainstream platform, and use all the utilities because maybe they'll have a bigger potential market. And then on the other hand, if they already have, let's say, 20,000 solid customers, depending on the trade-offs, they might continue to use the systems that they have in place, Jihad, in terms of, how they're able to push their product and close their sales. So I'm really interested to see how it's going to play out in Thailand and other parts of Asia.
Right. Lakeisha, you bring up a great point, which is, what if it does, a year from now, when you've got 200,000 people making businesses on Facebook or Twitter, what have you. And then the presidency says, you know what, we're going to ban that app. And now you've got 200,000 business owners saying, oh, hell you are. Oh, hell no. That's my business you're messing with, right? That gets very interesting very quickly, because now the president's like, shit, there's actually much more implications to banning this app than I thought. I'm killing a lot of businesses by doing that. So but that might actually entrench these social media apps into those countries in a way that makes them harder to remove, because now they are more fundamental to the economic, livelihood of the people there.
Hey, this is Matt. Stop me if this is the wrong analogy, but
okay,
isn't it on like the business owner, small business owner, if you want to put it that way, to like also diversify their platforms? If you put all your eggs into one platform basket, for me, actually, the analogy I'm thinking about is like Parler and Amazon Web Services. It's like, if you only put it in on one place and it gets pulled, isn't it kind of on you also as that small business owner that you can diversify the platforms that you're on?
Some platforms loan themselves to certain communities, and if you're selling certain products, Instagram will be, let's say, the only channel that your community is on. So ideally, yes, but for some niche products and verticals, there aren't multiple platforms that make sense, like a LinkedIn. I mean, it doesn't make sense for everyone versus Twitter. So it's a real conundrum.
Yeah, so I just want to
comment on India.
Go ahead, Frost.
On India, you may very well have another play happening as well, which is when Rakuten in Japan was looking to do its 5G launch and the social commerce launch and everything. At the same time, what was happening was you had the Indian Mukesh Ambani coming out with Jio, and they were all competing for the same sort of money. And forgive me, I'm not going to quote it, but I'll tell you at the back on the back channel. And if Mukesh, who knows? I'm just coming up with a theory. I have no evidence for this particular part of what I'm saying. But if Mukesh is planning on doing something in this space himself, there might be pressure coming from Mukesh politically, where he might be willing to launch something similar to Twitter or Clubhouse, or combined with Jio as a play to take over the social commerce space in India, because that's what he's very interested in.
Okay, so great. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So great point that I don't know his name now, just brought up. So the situation in Nigeria. So there is a politician known as Garuba or something. I can't remember his other name now. So he's developing an app known as Crowry app. So which is similar to Twitter and Facebook, right? Now the issue is he has been promoting the app since last year, especially from the protests in Nigeria, and he said he wants to sue Twitter and all of those stuff. So he has been promoting his app and urging Nigerians to buy into the app, right? The Crowry app, or what is it called? I don't even really care as much. So the problem that Nigerians then had with the app is understanding how Nigeria government can be really high-handed in some instances, and you being in bed with the politicians, right? Our data definitely is not safe with you, even if it's not safe with other people, but at least it's a better devil at the end of the day than giving it to politicians that are more likely to use it against you than use it for you, especially in the context of Nigeria. So that is really a thing where some people want to promote theirs, and thereby, because they're in government, want to kill others, and that is a really, really, really awful slippery slope, if you ask me. Other to that, so the business part of it, Nigeria, right, it's huge. The business community in Twitter is really, really huge, right? And you really wonder why Twitter in themselves would not even be happy with the app going away from the country, especially now that they are really interested in the affairs of Nigeria, despite not even establishing their office in Nigeria, maybe because of policies and all that instability they established in Ghana. But if you look at their recruitment process in Africa, it's majorly Nigerian. So they definitely will not be happy with that. And the businesses, apart from even business, politicians use it as well. So it is impossible, almost impossible, for the ban to take place long enough in Nigeria. Because election is just, by the way, 2023. These guys understand that if you want to get to Nigeria populace, the best place to get to them is on Twitter, or one of the best places, apart from on ground campaigning. So because of their own selfish interest, Twitter ban cannot be long. So I think that Twitter can just tarry a bit, and they will say that the government will bring it back by themselves for their own selfish interests. So it is not even a thing. Twitter can go out, one, for economic reasons, and two, for even the political reason. Trust is done talking.
Thank you, Trust.
Just a point, Tyler, on what Faraz said.
Okay.
Just want to bring it to people's attention that I think Facebook owns about 40% of Jio already. So,
yeah. So there's a whole bunch of headlines. Harry, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I did have a question before we get into other headlines, if that's okay, Tyler.
Yeah, sure.
Do you think that the social commerce will supplant e-commerce? I know Southeast Asia has like a big e-commerce scene, particularly in the Philippines. I can speak to that with like Shopee, Lazada, all that.
Yeah.
Do you think it will supplant it, or it will be they'll be symbiotic?
But symbiotic, because it started in China, and in China you have Pinduoduo and you still have Alibaba, and they coexist, and they address different markets actually. Where Pinduoduo, Alibaba has become more kind of enterprisey, more for business use cases, and where Pinduoduo is not only for lower down the totem pole, it goes out further geographically into the second and third tier and fourth tier cities that Alibaba wasn't their focus.
Doesn't Alibaba also have Taobao? That's the other one.
Taobao,
too.
right?
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Taobao, Tmall. Tyler, I would like to bring out this topic before you move on because it's really related to
Go
social
ahead.
commerce. So China, social commerce and e-commerce platforms in China will face severe punishment if they fail to purge spy camera tutorials, hidden camera videos, and cheap, easily compromised cameras from their platforms amid the CCP's push to tighten enforcement of privacy laws. So if looking at this, do you think the other countries will be alerted before?
Say it again. China's going to force people to put cameras in where?
No. They are going to punish those social and e-commerce platforms if they are not able to purge out all those spy camera tutorials, hidden camera videos, cheap and easily compromised cameras from their platforms amid the CCP's push to tighten enforcement of privacy laws. What I'm trying to say is, of course, this is happening in China, but because the other countries are now embracing social commerce, but after looking at this news, will they also be alert to actually tighten the whole thing first before it even started to get?
I just want to make sure I understand. So China's now not going to allow the e-commerce sites to sell cameras? I think your mic went out, Cheryl. Or my mic went out.
Tyler?
No, you're okay.
Okay.
Tyler, I think what me and Akhil are saying, you guys haven't been able to synthesize it together yet.
Okay.
So if I might, just quickly.
Right.
See, you've got Facebook, which owns 40% of Geo, which was started by one of the wealthiest men in the country. You have the government come after WhatsApp, make it look like the government is going after everyone. A play by Zuckerberg and one of the wealthiest men in the country. Two, it's essentially a Socratic play that they did to make it look like the government would go after Facebook and Twitter. They do that. Ambani gets involved. Facebook gets saved. Facebook and Geo get cleared. They go after Dorsey at Twitter, trying to remove Twitter from the market so that Facebook and Geo can now come in, build something together, and deploy it in India under Facebook's launch. Does that make sense now?
Yeah, I mean, we have a theme music that goes along with that, but it seems a little bit of a stretch.
Ask Akhil if that makes sense. Ask Akhil if that makes sense, or ask Monica if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. I have shitty network now, but I hope you guys can hear me. But yeah, it does make a lot of sense because here's the thing: the kids are taking over Reliance, and these kids are high-tech kids. They're not like the kids of old age. Geo actually started out with deep packet mining to kind of understand their whole user base and whatnot, and they've hired the best data scientists in the world, so they've got the data play down. It only makes sense that looking at the way WhatsApp's kind of behaved with the government, that these guys could be planning something and they could take on Dorsey.
That's why. Well, I mean, when I said India could tell Jack to hit the road, yeah, I mean, I wasn't. That's not far out of the realm of possibility, especially I think it's more to do with the fact that coup is there, and the coup is more responsible to India. And just for those who are just joining us, Twitter's in a bit of hot water with India on an ongoing basis, and India is telling Twitter, regularly, you got to remove this content we don't like, and Twitter is kind of resisting from time or not doing it as quickly as India would like. And now in the past,
so was WhatsApp.
Yeah. And in the WhatsApp case, it was initiated by the fact that WhatsApp was trying to change their privacy policies and was going to remove features of Indian users who didn't accept the new privacy policies. And India said, you can't do that. And then India wanted to sue. And then, WhatsApp wanted to sue. And then WhatsApp retracted and did everything India wants. I think in the end, India is going to win in every instance. I mean, in the meantime, Twitter has a new competitor in India called Koo, spelled K-O-O, which is a local domestic Indian company, which the government obviously prefers because they can control it much easier. And the app itself is playing much more friendly with the government. It's not being resistant to the government in the way that Twitter is. And They just got a whole bunch of funding. And they, by the way, they just went over to Nigeria and said, "Hey, Nigeria, we heard you're having problems with Twitter. Maybe we can help." And now it's being reported that the Nigerian government has created accounts on this Indian Twitter alternative, which is very interesting developments indeed. This all stems back to the point.
Tyler, I can bet you that in the next 4 months, India will come up with some other reason to get these apps out.
Twitter?
Twitter. Possibly WhatsApp, because all of this started back in February, right? And they gave out some BS reason that time, and they're going to give out some other BS reason 2 months ago, and then 2-3 months from now, they're going to give out another reason and just make it harder for these guys to stay in.
Let me ask you, Akhil, how much of that behavior of kicking out the non-Indian apps can we directly relate to Modi? And I ask because if in the next election there's a different president or prime minister, and say Modi's opposition party, whoever his main political opposition, wins the next election, do you think would you still believe that would happen?
Yep.
Or it would happen anyways?
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Hey, Tyler.
This is the first time in the country's history that the government is actually able to have full control over information platforms.
So it's not
any government that comes into power would take that opportunity.
This is not a Modi issue at all. It's
Nope.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Tyler, can I add something?
One second, Rudviz. Go ahead.
So did you say Koovs? Koovs?
No, KOO.
No, cool.
Cool. Okay.
KOO.
Oh, that's the Twitter. That's the Twitter piece. Right. Okay. I heard Koovs because there's a connection between the founder of Koovs and Reliance and Modi there. So if that's the company that's going after Twitter, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some back channel happening. But my bad. Thanks.
No problem at all. So Rudviz, go ahead.
Hey, Tyler. Yeah, so I just wanted to give you some input. So I was just in a room in Shashi Tharoor. He's one of the famous politicians of India. And he's on the opposite party that represents Modi. And he was just saying that in the parliament, he didn't give a very very expressive statement, but he did say that all the politicians are very, very pro on this. So I was just trying to give you information that Akhil was saying is very true, that it's not relevant to Modi only. It's that the government wants to control this and do it. But yeah, I would not be surprised if when the power changes just to eradicate the previous government, they do a switch. That might be a different condition, but for now all the political party are into it together.
Wow, interesting. Okay, Johan,
have we moved on? Have you moved on from the social commerce topic? I got cut off talking about CCP just now.
That's okay.
You want me to say?
Yeah, we're moving on. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Okay, just a quick one, because my question is, because right now in China, the social media and e-commerce platforms will be facing severe punishment if they fail to purge spy cameras, tutorials, hidden camera videos, and cheap, easily compromised cameras from their platforms, because CCP is pushing to tighten the enforcement of privacy laws. My question now is not within China. Yeah,
I understand your kind of Tokyo accent, but I just so everyone else can grasp it. China is forcing the e-commerce platforms to stop selling spy cameras and spy tutorials and those kinds of things that help people break privacy laws, basically. Cheryl? Wow, the CCP really is cracking down on these people who are exposing this stuff. Go ahead, Johan.
What's the news there?
Yeah, G7 calls on Russia to crack down on ransom gangs. From the G7, they communicated, "We call on all states to urgently identify and disrupt ransom criminal networks operating from within their borders." And signed by this statement is Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, UK, and the United States, more commonly known as the Group of Seven. I tweeted it to the account, and I hope my friend is sending it to you.
I got it. I'm going to tweet that out right now so that you can see this. The G7 calls on Russia to crack down on all of these ransomware gangs that we were just talking about 30 minutes ago. That because, as you heard me say 30 minutes ago, this is just starting, folks. We are in first gear, and we've got 4 more gears to go or you use your favorite sports metaphor, we're in the first inning or in the whatever. They even go so far as to say, in particular, they said, we call on all states to urgently identify and disrupt ransomware criminal networks operating from within their borders and hold those networks accountable for their actions. And then it says, in particular, we call on you, Russia, to identify, disrupt, and hold to account those within its borders who conduct ransomware, gangs, abuse, virtual currency laundering, ransoms, and other cyber crimes. And because this is just getting started and it's getting out of hand, and entire infrastructures are getting shut down. The meat production got shut down. The oil pipeline on the east coast of the U.S. got shut down. Gas stations got shut down. Cars were stranded. They didn't have gas. And it's just getting started. It's going to get a lot worse. And the frequency of these is going to grow exponentially, and you're potentially going to see 10, 20, 30 such attacks per day. And then you can imagine we're not that far off from getting a country economically kind of shaking in its boots as a result of that. And there's not a clear path out of this, and that's why the G7 felt it necessary to come out and say, hey, this is serious shit. And they don't deal in things that aren't serious shit at the G7, and that's why they felt it necessary to release this statement. But it ain't going to matter to a hill of beans, because there's no punishment attached to this. If the G7 was really serious about this, they would very simply say, hey, we as the G7 have all now said, if you attack any of us as the G7, we're going to treat it as an act of war, and drones will be dispatched, and your house will be blown to fucking bits. End of story. You're now a terrorist. We will treat you as such. And game on, your move, Russia. That would be how, by the way, and that's what they will do in about when they meet next year. That's what's going to happen when it's a little bit too little too late, and they've shut down the medical systems and the education system and, wreaked a whole bunch of crazy fucking havoc. Mark my words, next year they're going to come up with some real firm consequences. And until there are very firm consequences, it will be business as usual. Send me those $5 million of Bitcoins, please. Thank you very much. It's been fun playing with you. Because if there's no consequence, there's not going to change the action one damn bit. You think Big Daddy Vladdy gives a fuck what you say about stopping hackers? Yeah, good luck. Go ahead, Ben.
Tyler, on if there's no consequence, it's not going to change the action one bit. That can work the other way. That we could be controversially saying that the reason these companies' security is shit enough to get ransomware attacked is because, as much as you can talk about cybersecurity, being attacked doesn't whip you into shape and make you sort it out. On the idea that incentives are better than policies. So, I mean, I'm pretty white hat in my approach to things in general, but there is an element of anti-fragility here. If the more attacks there are, the companies that get attacked sort their security out, just put it that way. Whereas the ones that lots of companies think they'd like to sort their security out, but for exactly the reason you said, incentives work better than whatever you said, works the other way too.
Yeah, you're right. It takes two to tango. It takes someone to be hacked for a hacker to hack. It's a good point.
The thing was that this morning I was pinged into a room, since apparently people believe me when I say I hunt scammers and fraud. I was pinged into a room that actually the title of the room was "We Are Not All Scammers in Nigeria." And the thing was here that in that room it was a couple of corporate owners or company owners that actually are feeling that they are getting slammed for what other people within the country are doing. Is it the same for Russia? I have no idea.
That's a good point, because Nigeria is huge as a country, and it's a news issue, and the journalists need to be a little responsible for this, and we do too, by the way, by pointing out the fact that if for example, and Americans are really the worst at this, by the way, and I'm saying that as an American who grew up with American media, where the only thing we ever heard about Colombia was cocaine and gangs and all of that, and then you go down to Colombia and you realize, holy shit, this is a non-issue. This is like, I was utterly deceived. This isn't how it is at all. By the way, my friends in Japan, where I lived for many years, when they would come visit me in LA, they were worried they were going to get shot by the Crips and the Bloods, because all they ever saw about LA on Japanese NHK TV was documentaries about the Crips and the Bloods in South Central LA, which
Abu Nai.
Abu Naina. There's no reason to be worried about being shot by the Crips and the Bloods of going to Los Angeles. It's
and you survived apparently for a couple of years in Stockholm without getting blown up or shot, which is an actual reason to win here.
But that's not a good example, because that's the news coming out of Stockholm is very rarely that. The news coming out of that different places have very distorted images of other places. And to bring it back to Nigeria, I think the Nigerians are right. They're disproportionately, in America at least, and I don't know what it's like in Europe in terms of the news they get about Nigeria. But Americans associate Nigeria with Nigerian scammers, and that's very unfortunate because it's such an incredibly small part of Nigeria. It's like it shouldn't even be thought of that way. And they're rightfully, they got a legitimate beef there.
So one of the things, just to finish that one, what it actually ended up with is that I had two guys in that meeting that I gave the idea about, how about you start up a private agency, a private detective agency in Nigeria to help all the people abroad to actually get a hold of these guys, instead of sitting here and complaining over that we are getting neglected and pushed away because all they believe is scammers. Help us. And they were actually going to think about it, and then we have connected in the back channel. So it is a small hope there.
That's like telling Americans, like, oh, well, all you got to do, is like go after the Crips and the Bloods, and then the Japanese will stop reporting on that. It's like, how about the Japanese just report about other things?
Except we've had 100 mass shootings in the U.S. so far this year.
Now on that point we can agree. By the way, America does deserve the black eye that it's getting for the mass shootings. By the way, because that is truly unprecedented on a global scale.
I live in America. I'm an American, and it's terrifying. So I think it's unbelievable.
Yeah, so, and that hopefully unfortunately Americans are immune to embarrassment. Otherwise, we would be embarrassed into fixing that issue. As Australia did, but Americans have a very peculiar ability to ignore embarrassment that the Europeans would shudder from. But in terms of Nigeria, that hopefully this Tech News Around the World, I don't think we've ever mentioned Nigerian scammers even once, and we've talked about Nigerian unicorns dozens of times. So I'm hoping that things like this will help shift the perspective of what's going on in that, using that as an example. Because when you hear people like Trust on stage talking about Nigeria, Nigerian scammers is the last thing on his mind when we're talking about even Twitter in Nigeria or whatever. And in a weird way, maybe this Twitter issue in Nigeria is at least bringing Nigeria into the news in a way that is different than what Americans are used to hearing, and they realize there's more to Nigeria than just that silly old narrative of Nigerian scammers, and people get a broader perspective. But once people visit a place, then you realize, my God, we are so our people's visions of places are so shaped, mischaracterized by
Tyler, is there a Nigerian prince? Where is that Nigerian prince? That's all I want to know. And is he okay?
No, he's dead, and you have inherited him.
Yeah. So anyway, it's an interesting point, and I feel bad for people who live in places that get overshadowed by those kinds of issues. By the way, the Radeja, who's one of the people who sends us fantastic tweets, just sent in one 2 minutes ago about, and you actually raised a good question, which is this Russia hacking thing. However, this is a blessing and a curse in a weird way. Russia has fantastic engineers and the world's best hackers. So I don't know that they are embarrassed about the fact that they have the world's best hackers in the same way that Nigerians are negatively associated from time to time with scammers. Russia does have the world's elite hackers. I mean, that's just a very simple fact. Sweden has some as well. Ukraine, absolutely. But so this article that Radeja just shared from the Washington Post, which says, ransomware's suspected Russian roots point to a long detente between the Kremlin and hackers, and this is getting right to the heart of the issue right here. So I will tweet this out from our Twitter account. Thank you to Radeja for sharing this, and now you can read it yourself, but I'll just give you a little glimpse of it. It says, ransomware's suspected Russian roots point to a long link between Kremlin and hackers, which of course it does, by the way. And the Kremlin's been using their own elite hackers as part of their own intelligence agency to influence elections throughout what's that region of Eastern Europe, very notably in Moldova and whatnot. And that's being reported from within Moldova, by the way, one of many. The ransomware hackers suspected of targeting the Colonial Pipeline and other businesses around the world have set. This article is just a pain in the ass, this one to read. Sorry. And other businesses around the world have a strict set of rules. And first, it's a hard article to read. I'll let you read it yourself there. But the point is that indeed the Kremlin not only has its own elite hackers that work on its behalf, because I think Putin was one of the first people to really understand the advantage of the fact that the world's shifted to tech, and that international conflict can now be more than just throwing stones. It could be, interesting technological elements of at play, and I think he's used that to in a very interesting, clever ways, and taking advantage of the fact that they have such fantastic hackers over there who work hand in hand with the Kremlin from time to time. And then, of course, there are hackers who the Kremlin, I think, understands it's an advantage to have some hackers working at a distance, but within grasp of the Kremlin, because anything that's happening on their internet, they're privy to anyways. So the fact that when this pipeline hack first happened, it was naturally assumed that perhaps Russia might be involved in this. And it turns out that it's certainly people speaking Russian who are doing it. They figured that part out. The FBI did say it's happening in some western part of Russia. So that's not a coincidence why the G7 is saying particularly calling out Russia in this case, because they know goddamn well a lot of these hackers are in Russia. That's been determined. But the question is, what kind of links do these new hackers have? What are their links to the Kremlin? How direct are they? And are they intentionally using some kind of distancing to obfuscate the Kremlin's actual drive and kind of driving this behavior? It's a really interesting question, because if, no doubt, the Kremlin's not going to take responsibility and say, oh yeah, that Colonial Pipeline, oh yeah, that was us, that was me, it was Vladimir Putin, I took down your meat packing, oh yeah, I ordered that call to shut down your oil pipeline on the East Coast. Obviously they're not going to take those responsibility for that, and they don't have to. And that's one of the beauties of hacking, is traditionally when you were using warfare with missiles, well, you obviously it's the government throwing the missiles because they're the only ones who can afford them. But when you're using hacking as a form of some kind of technological warfare, the government doesn't need to take responsibility for it, because any school child with a laptop can conceivably be the bad actor in that case. And then the government can say, oh no, that wasn't us. That was some rogue 14-year-old acting on their own, causing all of that havoc. And that's where it gets really complicated, because now you could have a potential, forgive the word, army of rogue hackers, quote unquote, working on their own, which I'm warning you right now, that's what's coming in a very big way. The groundwork is being laid. That you think that these hacks are happening fast and furious now, you have seen nothing yet, my friends, because when these hackers are getting paid, and they're getting paid millions of dollars, do you know how much it costs to live in the Ukraine for a month? We're talking pennies on the dollar of what it costs to live in the US. So when they're getting a $5 million ransom, you are retired for life. You and everyone you ever met just retired for your entire life in Ukraine on that money. So that is a huge, huge, huge incentive to them and all of their friends who ever had access to a computer to, win the lottery, right? So, and a lot of people have those skills, and it's now, if they are successful in pulling it off, you're going to see an absolute explosion of this activity. And by the way, without any consequence other than the G7 yelling collectively, "Hey guys, please knock it off. It's not nice." Well, okay, well, whatever you say, Uncle Joe. Sorry to disturb you, Uncle Joe. But yeah, we're going to win the lottery. Fast forward, full steam ahead. So it's going to grow exponentially until such time that there is either an amazing, unforeseeable technological breakthrough to prevent all of this stuff. That, by the way, as amazing as Tel Aviv is in their cybersecurity, that ain't going to happen anytime soon. It's not on the menu for the foreseeable future. So I think it's going to involve what I said before, which is coming down with incredibly strict repercussions as a result of this. And then if hackers are treated as terrorists, and there's a good argument for that, and they are bombed, without warning via drones, then you'll see Vladimir Putin responding that his citizens, a house in, Western Russia or the Ukraine, somebody, their house was blown to smithereens because it was verified that they were the source of this, Colonial Pipeline hack. Yeah, then you'll see governments getting involved and reducing. So it gets very interesting and it's very concerning. And I don't mean to make light of it all because it's going to get much worse. But you're right.
Tyler, can I quickly come in?
Go ahead, Karim.
Yeah, just on this particular point, I think, we have to actually go into the history. If you look at the Cold War, it was actually putting the missiles on the Eastern Europe and then coming into the Cuba missile crisis. So that was sort of like a cross war to actually keep the balance. Now, there was a middle, like 2.5G, where we saw the time where, all these proxy wars been happening, like, in Yemen, in Afghanistan, in other parts of the world, like especially in the Middle East, that, Russia came in. Bashar al-Assad, actually got saved by Russia. Otherwise, it wouldn't, every single government in the Middle East was pretty much toppled. But here we go. All this proxy war. Now, this is the angle you brought in, in terms of the actual ransomware. This is just great. So the new Cold War is all about, trade. Who is going to actually grab more land and more resources and commodities and supply chain and everything. So that's what's emerging, like China because of the BRI and everything. And one thing we haven't touched upon, I think that's a great news, and we haven't really put much focus on that the US is actually working on this Blue Dot thing with Japan and Australia. And I think it's going to, over the time, it's going to become the real alternative to the BRI, and that's how it's being dealt with. So now, if the Blue Dot is actually going around the world and then having this hegemony, then ultimately that is going to be the next level of, proxy war going on, that who can actually, come in and, hack into their systems and then actually disrupt the supply chain and look into those, what we have seen into the meat processing plant. For God's sake, meat processing plant, let alone this whole supply chain of the oil and gas. So this is, I think, would be the new proxy war happening, because the new Cold War is all about actually the commodities and then bringing in new trade and all that. So that's just real. A little bit of analysis on my side.
Yeah, asymmetrical warfare. Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. Yeah, it's like the Cold War is over, and now the tech. I don't know what there will be a name for this very soon. Once it's understood what's really going on with all of these hacks and how there's state connections between them in some sense. Because, by the way, their own intelligence agencies, as the G7 says, if America says, "Oh, we know that hack came from Ukraine. Hey, Ukraine intelligence agency, you had this hacker who just did this Colonial Pipeline thing, and we know that because we paid them Bitcoin and we see where the wallet is. We know where they are. They're in Ukraine. They're your citizens. Take care of this shit." And that's a warning to you. And if it happens again, then the Ukraine intelligence agency knows, they can see in their own internet pipe, plumbing, where this is happening from, who's doing it, and yada yada. After, it's not going to take much longer of this for the states to become somewhat directly responsible for the behavior and controlling the behavior. And I think that's what the G7 is saying, is like, hey, look, where the picture is now clear. It's a lot of Russia. Hey, Russia, get this shit straight, or it's going to get ugly real quickly. Michael, you're unmuted there, my man. No, it's okay. Harry.
Oh, hey Tyler. I think the term right now of the moment is Vulcanization of the internet and Splinternet. That's what I'm reading.
Yeah, that's a factor as well. That's a whole other separate issue. It relates to the sovereign cloud rant that I go on from time to time, which I'll spare everyone that one because we just did it 2 days ago. But we'll hang tight with us here for the next few days, and you'll hear me go on a rant about the sovereign clouds and how we're all, not only are we splitting up geographically, like the UK, Brexit is just the first of many to come. And you can, I can't recommend highly enough Peter Zeihan's book, Disunited Nations, because it has predicted where we have gotten to today. And it's where it goes from here. If his predictions continue to follow through, it gets very, very interesting indeed. We're going to split up a lot, and it's very interesting how it plays out. And we're splitting up both geographically as blocks and as an internet as well. And so it's super, super, super interesting. Peter Zeihan, Disunited Nations. If you're not a fan of reading books, then you can go on YouTube and search Peter Zeihan, Disunited Nations. I'll even find the video and tweet it from the Twitter account. And you can watch, him giving a presentation, like a 90-minute version of with a slide deck, and it's just mind-blowing. Anyway, so people are sending in tweets fast and furious, and I got to get to some of these because I'm literally drowning in fantastic tech headlines that I will take in no particular order. The first and the biggest that is being shared in the tech sphere at the moment is from Bloomberg. It's a lot of outlets and publications sharing the news that Apple is planning to launch a faster watch with improved connectivity and a much better screen this year, and an entry-level and extreme sports model next year. And as part of that, it's rumored, according to some of the hardware folks that are involved in these factories that make these devices, that it may include a blood glucose meter, what's called a glucometer, a blood sugar meter, essentially, which will be an absolute game changer for diabetics who normally have to prick their fingers each day to and bleed onto little things and carry this little test kit. And this would allow everybody to test their blood levels in real time. And that could be an absolute game changer in helping address the incredible diabetes epidemic that's kind of sweeping not just America, but other places as well. So fingers crossed that those reports are true, because it would be an absolute game changer. So I'll send out the tweet on that one, as we always do, from the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. And next headline. Oh, did that tweet go out? My apologies. Twitter is freaking out for me today. Hold on. There we go. There it is. There it goes. That tweet is out. Okay. Next one up was the Google is making their workspace and chat available to all, and adds client-side encryption for data on Workspace to prevent, hackers from getting into your company data, as we've been discussing. And back on the Apple front, many Apple U.S. stores are now removing their mask requirements for vaccinated customers as soon as Tuesday. The question is, how will they know you've been vaccinated? Although no doubt Apple will have an app that allows you to show kind of a vaccine passport of sort in the weeks to come. It might be in the next operating system, and then the Amazon is launching their game streaming service called Luna, opening to all of their Amazon Prime members starting on Prime Day, June 21st and 22nd. And U.S. members of Amazon Prime can start a 7-day trial today. And why is that interesting? Because it was reported, there's another headline today that Amazon Prime is also trying to buy up the licenses to air the French soccer matches. And that's interesting because sports is an interesting category of content that TV stations used to compete over, and now these digital distribution platforms that people subscribe to are now far wealthier than the TV channels, and they are going to suck up the rights to these things, and so you'll only be able to watch the NFL or the NBA or the UFC or all of these things on either Amazon Prime or Apple TV or Netflix or whatever platform pays the most for the licensing rights to stream these matches in real time. And that's a whole new development, because they started off by doing the TV shows and then the movies, and now they're getting into sports. And that's why that headline about Amazon pursuing sports licenses in Europe is so interesting, because they just gave away the roadmap that they and their competitors are now going to be competing for all of the sports content between their platforms. And if you are an NBA fan, well, then you will have to subscribe to whichever platform acquires the licenses to stream it. And that will be a really interesting move. But similarly, Amazon, as in the headline I just read, is going to do the same thing around video games. All of these platforms are chasing after these video game titles in a similar way. So if you are a fan of one particular video game, you might have to subscribe to Amazon Prime if you want to continue playing that game. And that's also where it gets very interesting indeed. Like, the games are almost become like movies or TV shows on these different platforms. So very interesting. And one of the other biggest headlines in the tech sphere is about, it's very political, that Microsoft and Apple have both come out recently to say that they were subpoenaed to share very sensitive data about very high-ranking people in the U.S. government to the Department of Justice under the orders of Donald Trump. And now the CEO of Microsoft is coming out on Twitter, which we retweeted earlier, saying, and I'll quote here from his Twitter account, "These gag orders to investigate the media and Congress must stop. Our democracy rests on the fundamental principle of government transparency. Secrecy should be a rare exception, not the rule." And what he's referring to is the fact that the government very secretly was trying to gag the investigative process of Adam Schiff and many journalists like the New York Times, because they were investigating the collusion between Russia and Trump. As they're free to do. It's a free society. That's what journalists do. And that's what the House Intelligence Committee was doing. They were investigating if Trump had colluded with Russia. And so the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, all the political journalists were all investigating that. So was the House Intelligence Committee run by Adam Schiff. And in retaliation, Donald Trump asked Bill Barr, running the Department of Justice, to retaliate and investigate the journalists themselves and Adam Schiff from the House Intelligence Committee. And that, as Brad Smith, the CEO of Microsoft, is saying, that's where you are disrupting this democracy that rests on the fundamental principles of government transparency, because you're not being transparent that they were doing it. They did that secretly. They forced Microsoft and Apple secretly to reveal data about the journalists that were doing these investigations. And that ain't cool, y'all, because journalists do what they do, and they have sources that are unnamed sources. That's part of journalism. And basically, they obviously would have asked those journalists, hey, who are these unnamed sources? And those journalists would have told them to go F themselves. So they went to Microsoft and to Google and Apple, who control the emails for those journalists, and said, hey, those journalists won't let us see into their email inboxes. You open them for us. And Microsoft did. And now Microsoft understands they look really bad for doing that, and so does Apple. And that's why you see Microsoft CEO saying, yeah, that wasn't cool, government. Don't ask us to do that again, because you're disrupting democracy, the whole process of democracy, by doing that. And so that was another huge tech headline today. And that led me on a rant in our previous session 6 hours ago, where I said, you know what? Tech as it is we're starting to get into the deep end of the pool, where shit's going to get really crazy with all of these new technologies about, combative drones, that can now are starting to be able to be used in warfare, where, rogue armies can use swarms of drones to do, operations, and you've got, tech can be used by anybody, so you can get hacker collectives that can cause incredible damage, and you've got genetic engineering, which don't get me started on that rant about people rebuilding smallpox in a lab and wiping out huge hundreds of millions of people, as the Gates Foundation is predicting will happen. And it gets very concerning because already in 2021 shit is getting crazy with just social media, because the founders of these social media apps themselves had no idea it was going to get this crazy with social media. Jack Dorsey, and I know because I was in dinners with these folks when these things were starting, they never dreamed in a million years shit was going to get this crazy with Twitter and with Facebook, and how much impact they are having in international politics. And I say that because if you think social media is driving the world a little bit crazy, and it certainly is, wait until you see what genetic engineering is going to do, folks, because the technology is growing exponentially, and we are growing biologically and politically at a snail's pace, while AI is growing exponentially, and that gap is widening by the day, and that's what we are covering here. And so I say this because as that gap continues to widen and shit gets crazier and crazier, it certainly will, you're going to get politicians stepping up to the plate, running for office, saying, I can handle this. Me, Mr. Tough Guy, have all the answers. I'm going to fix all this. And I would behoove us all to pause at that moment and consider, is this person going to do what the CEO of Microsoft is warning us is? Are they going to be abusing their powers to, and we need to be very mindful of people being politicians, because as Netanyahu was just, democratically kind of ousted in the past 24 hours, that's thank God for the democratic process, and hopefully that was the right call for them. I'm going to stay out of it, the political implications of that. But what I do know is, there was potential abuses of powers that are being reported by Mr. Netanyahu, and when people start abusing their powers, that's where people need to be careful. And let's be careful that we're not electing people who might be abusing their powers. Let's keep that in mind when we consider political candidates going forward in these democracies. Because
Tyler, earlier we talked about like AI for good and the article there. This is kind of all under the actual category of like AI for bad, and with a subcategory like be careful which strongman politician you vote in, because the AI for bad is connected to that. I think
great.
It's
that's a huge point you just made, Dave, and I just want to make sure that one sunk in for everybody, because what you're saying is the tools that are developing can be used for good or for bad. And if you elect the wrong person, and they now have their fingers on tools that are actually potentially more impactful than even nuclear weapons, that's why to reiterate the point, we need to be more careful than ever that we're electing people who are going to use these tools in a fair, democratic, transparent way, and not in abuse of power type ways. So thank you for that, Dave.
Big time.
Yeah. Just quickly wanted to comment on this particular point. If you look at the 12-year history, like under the Netanyahu, on this particular point, yes, it's a great point they brought in. But at the same time, if we look at it, some of the technologies has been developed in the agriculture, for instance, and the famous speech by him, about the AI blockchain and the usage of it, and the number of companies, came out in last decade or so from that. And then the total contrast in terms of what's happening on the ground when using that technology. So, ARPA comes in, and then here we go. We have a great thing, internet. So it's other way around. But from this perspective, it could have been started developing on the actual, civilian use, and it brought in great innovation in the actual, normal sectors with the commodities and the agriculture and tourism and all that. And then on, refining that technology and start using it in the military phases. So, it's both pros and cons. But if you look at Netanyahu, like obviously right wing, like going about this whole thing, moving in and taking the, literally settlements and everything, legalizing it and annexation of it even to an extent. But at the same time, if you look at the civilian part of it, it's, becoming a, world leader in terms of bringing in the technology into the agriculture sector and exporting it to other countries also. So yeah, this is also an angle. I mean, no other premier actually stood up and given a speech on the AI and use of that in the normal, civilian sector.
Mm-hmm. So, but it's not unique to politics. This happens in business as well. And somewhat relevant to this point is one of Facebook's early and most important people, a gentleman named Dan Rose, who just appeared on my buddy Jason's podcast, This Week in Startups, which is his pinned tweet at the top of his Twitter account. And he just did a humdinger of a Twitter thread in the past 24 hours that the tech sphere is retweeting like mad. And so I'm doing the same. And you can read Dan Rose's Twitter thread about it. Starts with the first tweet. In my experience, the best founders develop a fighter mentality. Mark Zuckerberg was a fighter. And without that mentality, Facebook would have never achieved its full potential. Here's what I saw over 13 years working for Zuck. And he goes on a 20 tweet thread, which Evan replied to comically. And it's a brilliant thread of a really interesting insight into working directly with Mark Zuckerberg for 13 years. So you can check that out. And we already covered the G7 railing on Russia. We've got a whole mess of headlines I'm just going to jump into. The new antitrust bills that America is passing about big tech. Speaking of Mark Zuckerberg, America is trying to shut him down. And they're trying to shut down Apple and Facebook and Google and Amazon. And with these 5 new bills that were just revealed in the past few days. And now it's being reported these new antitrust bills are probably dead on arrival. Antitrust action isn't going to happen. That's the report from Protocol. I'm tweeting this out right now.
I can go into that a little bit.
Go for it.
Yeah, so actually tonight, this is a nice little segue for a nice little plug. We're going to have a Bloomberg government tech policy reporter on to discuss the antitrust bills that were introduced in the House on Friday. So Tyler's 100% right. You're not going to see any action on this legislation between now and the elections in 2022. However, juxtaposing antitrust legislation to something like Section 230 is very interesting because Section 230 is something that everybody agrees they hate, but they just have no path forward. Now, antitrust, on the other hand, everybody agrees they hate big tech, and they do have some paths forward. These pieces of legislation specifically are bipartisan. And as you look at 2024, I know that seems like a lifetime away, but it's really not in politics. We think in every 2 years, folks. We think about elections. 2024 is significant because that's the next U.S. presidential election. But you have a lot of members of the Senate in both parties, Republican and Democrat, who are positioning themselves for 2024, 2028. And an example of this would be Senator Amy Klobuchar, who has released a book on antitrust legislation, essentially. And then also Senator Josh Hawley, who's going to position himself in the GOP in the Republican primary in 2024. And he also released a book on big tech and how to combat it. So what does this all mean? It all sounds like jargon. It all sounds like it's not necessarily useful information. No, it is. The point here is legislative action in Washington, D.C. takes a shitload of time, especially when the issues are, 1, important and wide-ranging, and 2, have a ton of money in lobbying against any type of action. Like I'm sure you can imagine, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Google are all throwing into this fight to prevent these bills from coming forward. However, and now this is where I go from the factual analysis that I just gave into my personal opinion, I think that this is very, very important because despite no action being imminent, like as in the next year or two, I think that action will almost certainly happen. And this is just another stake in the ground. You have bipartisan support. You're just going to need to have ultimately the timeline align with the support so that essentially the most ripe time for action would either be heading into the 2024 election, depending on the makeup of the House and Senate, or right after 2024, depending on the campaign that is run and the issues that are highlighted by Democrats and Republicans, you could see the Biden administration pivoting to a second term big tech focus along with continuing China, or you could see a President Hawley or a President DeSantis begin to pivot towards big tech. And while the Republicans primarily care about Section 230 and people getting thrown off of platforms, it's much easier to do antitrust first, so they could use that energy of Trump being thrown off the platform and direct that into antitrust legislation. So that's kind of my analysis there.
Thank you, Justin. Do give Justin a follow, and now you see why I'm such a big fan, and hang out in his room, which precedes this room each day. It starts 2 hours before this room starts, and we hang out there for 2 hours and talk about all the political news around the world. And then we jump over here and jump into the tech news. But once in a while, they overlap, and it's fun when it does. And that, thank God, I hang out there to answer some of the geeky questions. He hangs out here to answer some of the give some more of the political side of things, and it's a beautiful setup. So thank you for that,
What's
Justin.
really interesting is how far in advance Justin is able to make accurate, predictions about who's going to be in office. I would like to have Justin's crystal ball.
Well, I think it's because you're a geek, Francine, as am I, and we can see it in each other from a mile away. And I think we are not political figures, and so to us, it's still a little confusing. In the same way that technology, you and I are able to predict things in technology that Justin would be confused about in a similar way.
I'm just lucky I can use my iPhone, Tyler.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's the grass is greener kind of thing. It's like, Francine and I can tell you all day long about how some of these interesting tech games are going to play out, because we've been watching these patterns over decades. And, and there's people that do the same in the political spheres who, like Justin said, can't even use an iPhone, but they know the insider game of what's really driving everybody and internally, and then you can make accurate predictions of what's happening behind the scenes in DC, and we can make accurate predictions of what's happening in Silicon Valley, because we know the actual people involved in these things and what makes them tick. And when you know the people involved and what makes them tick, you can accurately predict which horse is going to win the race when you train with those horses every day, and how those horses behave with each other. And that's why wealthy folks like to breed horses.
Or governors.
Or collecting governors as well. There's just a mountain of news going on. So there's apparently a Chinese. This is breaking. CNN is calling it an exclusive, but now the whole world's reporting on it. So sorry, CNN, this is no longer an exclusive. The U.S. assessing reported leak at Chinese nuclear power facility. And it's the warning included an accusation that the Chinese Safety Authority was raising the acceptable limits for radiation detection outside the Taishan nuclear power plant in the Guangdong province in order to avoid having to shut it down. Let's hope and pray that gets under control very, very quickly. And that's very, very unfortunate. Anywhere in the world that anything like that would happen, that is really, really unfortunate. And let's pray to God that hackers are not involved in that. And
that is why nuclear powered in the United States since the 60s, even though it's theoretically renewable.
Yep.
But Tyler, did you, real quick, I won't go on a long monologue, but the interesting thing, the news behind the news there, is that it's a co-owned between the CCP government or whatever, a private company in China, same thing, and a French company. And the Chinese government has not acknowledged that there is a leak. However, the French company has went to the United States government and actually asked for assistance. And this is apparently it's super out of the norm. And over the weekend, you had the Biden administration calling the National Security Council in to have meetings about this, because normally you don't have that happen. And I think Everybody is saying that the leaks aren't that bad right now. They're looking through the data. But essentially, the French company came to the U.S. because China's trying to cover it up. And instead of address that there's actually a leak, they're raising the
exactly,
amount
Justin.
of nuclear material that's actually acceptable so that the plant can keep running at full capacity. And I think that this really, to put a fine point on it, goes to how nobody can trust the CCP government, how there is drastic reverberations of their lying about COVID-19 and covering it up. And now foreign governments are more on top of this, and they're asking for more cooperation. So I think
this was exactly the playbook during the USSR with Chernobyl. I mean, we didn't find out about really Chernobyl until the Scandinavian countries started seeing radioactive emissions in their air, water, and soil, and then we sort of realized the scope of Chernobyl. So this is like the same playbook repeating itself. Very scary.
Yeah, remember this is an EPR reactor as well, so it's a water-cooled reactor, probably fed by a river source, so there's potentially contamination of downstream. So quite interesting one to watch.
Watch the documentary on Chernobyl. I think it's on Netflix.
I was listening to the CNN International when I tweeted that they are still discussing it in a sense. I think they've been assessing it, but at the same time that they just can't trust because of what happened COVID, and still doesn't seem to be transparent investigation. So yeah, that's what they're saying, that China needs to be a bit more transparent so that it doesn't become the COVID that we are in.
Yeah. Just touching back quickly on the antitrust articles in the U.S. that Justin was speaking about. There's a headline now, and I believe Cheryl sent this one in, or thank you to whoever sent it in, that Japan, that's being reported, Japan to start antitrust probe on Apple and Google, as is...
Tyler, just to interrupt, my apologies.
Yep. Okay.
I have my authentication sent to you on the back channels.
Okay. This article about Japan also doing antitrust probes on Apple and Google. It's just to keep count here now. The UK made an announcement last week to the same. The EU's doing the same. In essence, China's doing the same. America's doing the same, and it's amazing how these are all happening rather simultaneously. And I'm wondering if somebody has it's just they're all, I mean, within 1 month, if they're all happening at the same time. It's really kind of wild why they're all following in the same so closely with each other. It's quite remarkable. Yeah. Big tech is certainly it's going to have its hands full for the next several months, and it'll be interesting to see how each country deals with each of these in their own unique ways. So thank you to who sent that in. And then kind of speaking of the politics side of it again, I believe it was Faraz who just sent in this one that's now being reported. Netanyahu plans a comeback even before the new government was sworn in yesterday, claiming, quote unquote, we'll be back soon, he said, before the successor was even sworn in, the coalition being shaky. But also the combination of that and the questioning of the election results, it just seems way too similar to other strongman types that I would just encourage us voters in democratic systems to be more conscious of, and hopefully just encourage the parties to find candidates who don't fit those profiles, because it's a very concerning development globally. I'm not picking on any one country, honestly. It's just it's a character type that we need to be more conscious of, that is going to appear more frequently, that are prone to abuses of power. There's several countries that know exactly what I'm talking about and have fallen far more victims than others. And so let's just keep these in mind, shall we? So I just put it like that. One interesting article is, and my apologies for not remembering who sent this in, that about whales are apparently there are a lab and some researchers trying to translate whale speak. And the headline is, will humans ever learn to speak whale? Perhaps not, but I bet a computer will learn to speak whale and translate it for us. And what do those clicking sounds mean exactly? So sperm whales are among the loudest living animals on the planet, producing creaking, knocking, and staccato clicking sounds to communicate with other whales that are a few feet to even a few hundred miles away. And the symphony of patterned clicks, known as codas, might be sophisticated enough to qualify as a full-fledged language. But will humans ever understand what these whales are saying? And the answer is maybe. But first, researchers have to collect and analyze an unprecedented number of sperm whale communications. And guess what? That's what AIs are really good at doing. So, interesting article about how AIs can be used to match the incredible variety of sounds and patterns and pattern recognition. AIs do better than any human ever will. So let's apply AI to decode what the hell these dolphins and whales are saying exactly, and what an interesting project that is. I just tweeted that out so you can do the deep dive on that. That'll be a fun one to bring up at your next dinner party. And as I was saying an hour or so ago about future Apple watches and devices, and that they're the upgrades that are coming to the watch face and the battery and yada yada yada. Here's an article that I was looking for that I'm retweeting out now, that future Apple watches could feature blood glucose and body temperature sensors, but its 2021 refresh likely to bring minor updates. But I guess it will be in the 2022 version that it will have this is, again, it's being reported from multiple sources now over multiple weeks, that the upcoming Apple Watch will have a blood glucose. And now this one is new, the body temperature sensors. That's truly interesting. And I wear
an Aura ring. It's a company out of Finland, has $1 billion valuation called Aura, ORURA, and it already does temperature sensors. Oh, great. Yeah, and it's being used in places like the NBA for early COVID detection. It can detect temperature increases of fractions of a degree, which is an early sign of COVID. Thanks.
Yeah, well, they did a partnership with UCSF, University of California, San Francisco, at the early days of COVID, because they realized they could detect minute temperature changes while people sleep, which is the important thing. That's the whole Aura ring, which, by the way, they launched it at my event about 9 years ago, 2010, when it was just Petri and his co-founder. And
love it. A week-long battery life too. It's an amazing device.
Incredibly humble, finished guys, and who've had a lot of very well-deserved success, who were laughed at in the early days, nearly 10 years ago, for saying that they could do these things. It seemed like a scam. It seemed too good to be true that a ring could do what we now know it can do very well. And they're wildly popular, so I think most of the people on stage know exactly what we're talking about. But I just want to add the additional context that it couldn't happen to a nicer group of guys from Helsinki. And
I'll predict that Apple buys Aura within 12 months. That's my personal prediction.
I would hope they do. The argument against that is that they're going to be able to get the data from that the Aura ring collects through the Apple Watch, which would then nullify the need to acquire it. And that brings me no pleasure to say this. I wish nothing more than for Aura to have a fantastic exit and a fantastic financial future. So what I fear is that Apple will continue to do this, add the body temperature sensors, add all the other sensors that are part of Aura into the watch, because the watch is bigger than the ring, and so conceivably they will eventually be able to add all of Aura's features into the watch. Part of Aura's secret sauce, though, is the app, and Apple needs to make those innovations and updates to the app part of the Apple Watch as well. But time will tell. But the fact that they're adding body temperature sensors and glucose monitors, that is game-changing shit. Don't get me started on a whole personal data issue and medical data issue. I do that rant. I try and limit myself to once a week, so I've already done it once this week. But join us tomorrow. I might be in inclined to jump into it,
Tyler?
Hans. Yeah.
Why don't they go into hearing aids? I mean, there should be a
Funny you
whole
ask,
bunch of.
Hans. They would argue that they have, because in their recent
Yeah.
event, they showed that the new versions of the upcoming AirPods are going to have the new capability of targeted listening to essentially make them function like hearing aids, and have yet another interesting hidden benefit that they don't look like hearing aids. And then, as Heyman would tell you if he was on stage, a lot of older folks that he works directly with don't want to wear hearing aids out of embarrassment, because it signifies you as being old. But if you're wearing Apple AirPods that get essentially the same technological benefit, but without the stigma of wearing hearing aids, then it's sort of a win-win. And so I would argue that they are adding hearing aids. Some of the most important features of hearing aids are being added to the Apple AirPod lineup.
Hearing aids,
If
traditional
they want
hearing
to
aids
collect
are
data
very
that way, they
expensive.
need to.
Traditional hearing aids are also very expensive and not covered by Medicare. So
Exactly.
it's kind of interesting that Apple getting into the hearing aid industry, in the hearing aid functionality, let's call it that, is really a boon for people who have lost their hearing, which is everybody who's a boomer and went to concerts.
Yeah,
And
I
they're
would add
Gen
that
X.
And
there's a
also,
company.
if you
There's a
are
company.
going really into hearing aids, it will be a 16, 18 hours a day data collection, and I don't think you will get that with the device that they are putting out now.
Yeah,
So
there's a whole class of products called hearables, which are the new wearables, and companies here in Boston like Bose have introduced their own hearing aid products that are under, I think, $800, which for hearing aids is extremely cheap, and for a very high quality hearing aid made by a consumer electronics company, Bose. So it's a fascinating space and idea about Apple getting into this area as well. And as we all get older and grayer, I hope that more companies come up with consumer electronics like hearables for us hard of hearing folks. Thanks.
Well, and Evan, as you say that, is, the collective we is generationally younger. So no longer is it just about the baby boomers. It's the older edge of the Gen Xers who are Apple natives. And so, they're the target population for Bose and, maybe some of these other companies that are entering this space, so 60 is the new whatever, So I think that it's really smart strategically for them to make it multifunctional and different from, our grandmother's hearing aid.
Yep.
Tyler, I actually shared this story yesterday. I don't know whether you actually discussed this. That was a CNN story yesterday, and that was done on 500,000 Brits. So scientists were successfully, by analyzing the data on 500,000 Brits, they could successfully predict that, or analyze that that depression is directly linked to our sleep patterns, and that circadian rhythm is somehow are affected because of the night owl or the morning person. But this is how the depression actually happens. But that study could have been possible if that data was there, that wearable data was there on 500,000 people. So that's where the world is going in terms of the actual data accumulating through the wearables, and that's already what we are discussing at this point in time. So the world is going to be very different. That the AI engine is going to be actually working on all that data, and then having some of the analysis which we couldn't have done that on ourselves and on the world, around the world, would be possible now.
Well, another new thing, by the way, just in the past week, I believe it was yesterday, over the weekend, Saturday or Sunday, we got into a bit of a deep dive about the future of transportation, as we are prone to do, every few days or so. And this headline I'm about to share is just piggybacking right onto what is clearly a huge kind of investment or innovation geyser around vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. And what do I mean? Well, you have to see these for yourself if you've never seen one. I'm tweeting them out right now from the Twitter account at TNATW from the BBC. The headline is Virgin Atlantic explores flying taxi partnership. Virgin, and they're not alone. We've had about 10 of these in the past 4 days. It's everybody's into this. Hyundai, Uber, you name it. Everyone's doing flying taxis. Google as well. Google's co-founder, Larry Page, very notably. And so you'll see the photo of this flying taxi in the tweet that I just sent. Do follow the Tech News Twitter account because we share every article we talk about there in real time, and many others as well that we don't talk about on stage. And so the Virgin Atlantic is exploring whether it could launch a flying taxi service. The airline suggests electrical vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, and that, which is interesting in itself because it's an electric airplane essentially, and it can
completely silent. I love the article about it doesn't make any noise, which everyone
30 decibels. Yeah, 30 decibels is practically nothing. That's like speaking volume, and 30 decibels. And they do vertical takeoff and landing, which means you don't need airports. In fact, you could do rooftop to rooftop, or they show some of these vertical takeoff and landing airports, which are just a circle on the ground. It's like a helicopter, takeoff and landing spot. And that saves an incredible amount of money of not having to build airports, and you can use them in cities, inner cities where you don't have airports. And in this case, it shows this Virgin Atlantic fully electric flying taxi, vertical takeoff and landing, flying over London. And one expert said the proposal was less radical than those other air taxi companies, but argued there would be challenges ahead. But the point is that, my God, everybody's jumping into this full head first. And then the article here from the BBC goes into the feasibility, which we will save for another day, hopefully when the flying car guy can join us again, because no doubt he's got a lot of years of mileage, no pun intended, on this
that's
topic.
The perfect one for him to get into. Yeah.
Yes, but cost. This is going to be a way that billionaires can be transported.
There's one thing to add in, Tyler. Notice it says it's near silent when cruising. It will not be, and none of these things ever will be near silent when taking off and landing, unless, I think it was, I can't remember who said last time. Somebody said maybe anti-noise, but I think the problem with anti-noise is that the energy, a lot of the energy that's expended flying these things goes directly to noise. So anti-noise would use so much power to have speakers loud enough to cancel the noise out that I think that would be a massive drain on their batteries. But just note it says when cruising. It will be horrendously noisy when taking off and landing.
It's in the article, the BBC article, there's a couple of interesting quotes where it says, "We have taken the approach that is pushing the bounds of what is available in terms of technology. With a 15-meter, 49-foot wingspan, the aircraft would have to fly to and from designated spots such as helipads. As with other aircraft, it would be subjected to strict safety and regulatory checks. The Velis, as the vehicle is called, will carry 2 people, half a toothbrush, and fly for about an hour and a quarter. That is conventional airplane. That is a conventional aeroplane, and thus pretty efficient compared to anything with vertical takeoff and landing." But I would just encourage you to see this device. It does say, to Francine's point, they're not cheap to begin with, but assumedly, like all, really exciting or initial technologies, the price would continue to drop as adoption and scale picks up. And we might, and the interesting thing is, I guess in our own life, this now seems like it could happen within the next, decade or two. Vertical takeoff and landings within cities.
It's also a really beautiful looking aircraft as well to look at. So thanks for it looks really cool.
Yeah, this particular Virgin Atlantic photo from the BBC is perhaps the most beautiful rendering I've seen of one of these.
It's proven, by the way, Tyler. It's the same as an Osprey. Have you seen the Osprey, the US military Osprey aircraft? Yeah, so it's basically exactly the same concept as that. It's just got 4 rotors instead of 2, and it's electric.
And there are very advanced prototypes of these devices. I saw one at CES, the last in-person CES 2020, and it was Hyundai had an amazing prototype.
Indeed, they do. That was one that we covered over the weekend, and Hyundai's certainly jumping headstrong into that. Speaking of electric mobility companies, Tesla's in the news yet again. This time related to Bitcoin. Bitcoin climbs near $40,000 per Bitcoin after Elon Musk says that Tesla could start using Bitcoin again for buying Teslas. Specifically, he claims they will start accepting Bitcoin as soon as it's provable that at least 50% of Bitcoins are generated from green sources, essentially. And to the point I made when he first made his announcement that they would no longer be, it was a month or so ago when he announced that they wouldn't be accepting Bitcoin anymore for fear or concerns about the greenness of Bitcoin mining. And at that time, I did say Elon's going to, as Elon does, he's going to want to see the data and get down to the physics of it. And as soon as he has the actual hard numbers, which is not easy, but not impossible, perhaps, then as soon as he can make the argument that it is actually green, he will very happily change his position. And it really just comes down to the data. And if the data is that it's green, he'll adopt it as soon as it's provable. And if it's not, then changes need to be made to make it a little more green. 51%. If 51% of mining is green, he'll go back. Yes, Cheryl.
How long more does it take for all the Bitcoins to be done mining?
2140, Cheryl, finishes.
How many more to go? That means how long does it take for all
until the year 2140?
120 years.
What?
120 years, yeah.
For the last 10%?
Yep.
The last
1%. It's an exponential decrease, yeah. Yeah, no, there is about 10% to go. We've got about 18 million done.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, for the remaining 10%. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, the remaining 10-ish% is going to take about 120 years more. It just gets exponentially harder as time goes on.
So what's your prediction of the price in 2140, Ben?
Oh, no idea. I mean, the whole point of the market is price discovery. It's exactly what it's doing right now. It's trying to work out what the price is. It doesn't matter what it is. Because...
I was kidding.
Yeah. No, sorry, I'm not being funny, but I wish I had that crystal ball.
But on that point, the price of Bitcoin could go up incredibly high in the next 48 hours. And here's why. The Tanzanian president today came out and said they want to adopt crypto. And we had somebody from Tanzania on stage in our previous meeting where we met 7 hours ago to break that news because it was breaking news at the time. And it's very, very interesting news because it comes on in the wake of El Salvador's leadership voting in Bitcoin as an official legal tender of El Salvador, and reports that Cuba now has similar aspirations, as does a particular parliament member in Mexico is going to try and push that through, and Nicaragua apparently has some people interested in trying to make that happen. And there are also in the back channels in the geek community rumors that Jack Dorsey is going down to Costa Rica to try and push that agenda there, strangely. And then you have Africa, where in the past 48 hours, Nigeria is saying they're going to have their own central bank digital currency, to which Jack Dorsey has been tweeting now multiple times that Nigeria should essentially adopt Bitcoin.
Of course, when Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, everybody thought they could. So I think there's going to be a bit of that psychology there.
Yeah, great point, actually. And so this is where it gets interesting, because if Tanzania's mentioning in the president there, who apparently is within my question to the gentleman from Tanzania who joined us on stage was, how technically feasible is this in the case of Tanzania? And we got into the technicalities. It's quite simple, actually, that today money is exchanged through mobile money systems, which are tied to the telecommunication companies. Because that's how much of Africa exchanges money from mobile to mobile through the mobile carriers. But they cannot do crypto transfer. even on a regulatory basis. They can't technically or on a regulatory basis do that. So it would require some other system to enable crypto to be done in the way that the Tanzanian leadership is suggesting. And that led to the question, and that the gentleman from Tanzania said that, in fact, the Cash App, which is run by Jack Dorsey, is, in fact, trying to push into these African markets as a sort of solution, because they are a digital wallet, and they are a digital wallet that does handle crypto. And so this does get very interesting indeed, because we should pay very close attention in the next day or two or three if other countries' leadership take a similar stance in favor of Bitcoin. Because if they do, that could have sort of a cascading effect, because you could start to imagine that the leadership of South America or African countries who kind of can work as a bloc decide they're going to all accept Bitcoin, for example, together, and start trading amongst themselves as a South American bloc or an African nation bloc in Bitcoin amongst each other. And if that happens, and I bet they're having those conversations as we speak, and if they decide on that, that could send crypto sky high very, very quickly. Yeah.
But you have to.
I was gonna add that.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Messi.
I was gonna add that Ghana. I was just gonna add that Ghana also, just a week and a half about that time, the Bank of Governor, he said that they are actually also experimenting into implementing. And then he said that they were gonna start with ECD. I guess that's part of making electronic of their version of crypto, and that they are going to do it in 3 phases of implementation, and that they are moving in that direction as well. That's all.
But that's more interesting than you're implying, and I'll say why, and then I'll hand it to Froz. Because Mr. Jack Dorsey set up Twitter in Ghana, of all places. Of everywhere in Africa that he could have set up Twitter, he set it up in Ghana. And when he visited there, he showed tweets of himself having a fantastic time in Africa, and he even said, "I'm planning to move here." So,
yes, I think that's true. That's very true. But it was quite interesting to me that when they say they are going to try to experiment with ECD, just because it was less volatile than the Bitcoin. That's the justification they said, but they are definitely experimenting, and they are moving that way, and that they will be joining soon. That's what they say, the Governor General of the bank.
Yeah, but it's super interesting because Jack is playing a super interesting, very peculiar role at the moment by even meddling in international financial politics with Nigeria by, sending out tweets that Nigeria should be pro-Bitcoin on minutes after their government's making announcements that they're planning their own central bank digital currency. That's kind of irresponsible, some might say reckless, for somebody in his position to do that, not only as the CEO of Twitter, but as the CEO of one of the world's biggest fintech companies, which happens to enable crypto transactions with their digital wallet, which could be a solution, as the person from Tanzania said, that he is making motions to try and get Cash App accepted in Tanzania, which would be a solution to enable the president's ambitions. And the fact that he's has an office in Ghana, has made comments that he would consider living in Ghana, and that Ghana itself has aspirations along these lines. It gets super, super interesting, because I think Jack understands that the America and Europe is, when they do embrace crypto in some capacity, it's going to be incredibly regulated and controlled in a very bear-hugged, semi-centralized way, where in South America, in Africa, you could have Bitcoin operating in a decentralized way, which we have very strong reasons to believe Jack Dorsey particularly has a strong interest in, because he was asked in the past 48 hours, why doesn't he make Twitter exist on the blockchain in a decentralized way? And essentially his response is, it's only a matter of time, implicating that he fundamentally appreciates the importance of decentralized. And if he understands and appreciates the importance of decentralized for Twitter, well, then it's safe to say he feels similarly about decentralized Bitcoin. So this could get very interesting very, very quickly.
But when
us,
Jack,
sorry.
Okay,
Yeah,
Faraz.
Did you have something? Sorry, yeah, for us.
Yes, thank you. So, Tyler, having done a little bit of business in Africa, what one has to realize is that the African people and that the African continent, even since before crypto existed, has been very, very innovative in how they have transacted, and even the people without having bank accounts have transacted in the form of currencies without having smartphones. And what has played a typical role, and one of the earliest roles in this, is the telecom sector. So now what you need to watch for is the same earliest Bitcoiners that were going down into Latin America in the earliest of times for crypto. Which ones of them are going into Africa? And this is just my own thesis, and you can follow this yourself, and I've sent you information on who's going down, and it's openly being seen in the tweets, and which kind of Bitcoiners are going down, with which kind of capital. You have to look at that, also combine it with which telecoms, and not just publicly traded telecoms or public telecoms or foreign telecoms coming into the continent of Africa, which state telecoms are giving out stakes and are open to foreign parties to come in to buy stakes in them. Because when foreign parties come in and buy stakes in government telecoms or state-owned telecoms and combine themselves with the already existing system that Africa has developed for ages to be able to trade currencies with the unbanked population and be able to and integrate that system, such as M-Pesa or the other methods that they have in Africa that control the African continent with crypto, then that builds further for a case for Twitter and Dorsey and all his earliest of early friends in the Bitcoin community, where sometimes they don't reveal those friendships, to be able to execute a perfect strategy like they're trying to do in Latin America, but to a further and much more precise extent in Africa. I'll leave it there, and I'll let you figure out from the earliest of tweets in this morning. And for us, I'm done.
Can I add to that? Can I add into that? Oh, okay.
Let's go Messi, and then there was and Mabona.
Should I go first?
Thank you.
Yeah, go Messi and then Mabona.
Okay, I was just gonna add what Faraz just said. So just today in Ethiopia, I am on the ground. Just they announced that.
Thank you. That was one of my earliest tweets this morning.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. That just the Ministry of Finance just took out, like they published the tender out to privatize 40% of the Ethio Telecom that has been a public monopoly for a while, forever as far as we know, so that the foreign investors are now free to tender and join by buying 40% stake into the company. On top of that, the Cardano team has been here since they had the MOU in March 2020.
I have a crush on you. I'm falling in love with you now.
Oh,
oh my.
Thank you.
Oh, welcome to Shoot Your Shot Geek Edition, folks.
Did you say you?
Oh, yeah, wow.
So just to finish up that, they have been here. They had an MOU with the government, the Cardano team. They are not really getting into the currency, but they have agreed into implementing the technology side of it, and they have started just about 2 months ago. The Ministry of Education came out, and the team, the Cardano team, has already doing uniquely identifying minting of 5 million students with close to 1 million teachers to trace and quality and education delivery. And what they said was next year is going to be how they're going to be moving into higher education, where people can have a minted and uniquely identifying certification, so that there would be no this illegitimate kind of higher education so that they can apply for going to work and other things. But on top of that, they said their third and biggest project is going to be in giving unique identity for the unbanked, where in Ethiopia, about almost 80% of the people live in the countryside and the majority are still unbanked, and that they're going to do by giving that digital identity that would give them financial inclusion and microfinancing investment would be in a bigger. And one last thing I will mention is the Cardano team and others are saying that they are just headquartered and getting started in Ethiopia, and that they would be launching it into the rest of Africa once they launch these starting projects. This is Messi. I'm done speaking.
Thank you, Messi. Mabana?
Yes, I wanted to add extra context in a history lesson because I do find it incredibly frustrating. Those who are coming from the Western world, I don't blame them sometimes because, of course, when you have bank accounts, and you haven't been and lived the life on the ground, it's hard to understand how powerful mobile money has become and how much of a miraculous success it has been, right? I mean, just to give you some background, this was kind of seeded by the British government. I remember a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was a week ago, we discussed the British impact in foreign development in Africa, but it was Vodafone who, with Safaricom, had a trial in Kenya to experiment with moving airtime, and using that moving airtime was already established. You could send your grandmother or your uncle up in the village some airtime for mobile to call you back, right? That was kind of how it started. And essentially some genius said, wait a minute, isn't moving airtime just value? Couldn't we just use the same infrastructure that's cash in, cash out? People buying vouchers, airtime vouchers, to do the same thing with money, right? And so essentially, I believe, and love for some of the crypto folks who also are not just Bitcoin maximalists, but also central bank digital currency advocates, or at least understand it or the potential to recognize that mobile money is kind of a form of central bank digital currency, right? Because essentially what Kenya did with Safaricom, which by the way is partly owned by the government, as well as Vodafone, they essentially kicked off this in, I think, 2007, right? And then grew it to the point where Kenya had a third of its GDP flowing through M-Pesa. You could buy government bonds with M-Pesa. You could buy crop insurance. You could pay for school fees. You could do a hell of a lot. You could do prepaid solar. A lot of companies built on top of that. And then other mobile operators said, hey, this is an interesting idea. And so they copied it. So it spawned Airtel, which is an Indian telco that kind of came in and bought an existing Arab telco called Zain. And they expanded that with Airtel Money. Tigo from Latin America did the same thing, expanded into a number of countries. MTN, one of the biggest telcos in Africa, did it in Uganda, but it's only recently launching in Nigeria, and even in Zimbabwe, Econet Wireless, right, which is Zimbabwe did EcoCash on the same model, cash in, cash out with the telecom infrastructure and being able to transfer value. Now we've had crypto startups try and piggyback on top of this before. One of the ones I know very well is BitPesa, right? BitPesa, as in the name, tried to kind of combine M-Pesa in Kenya with Bitcoin. They had a very nasty reception in Kenya because the government said, sorry, this was like 5-6 years ago, the first crypto boom. They essentially got kicked out. In fact, the government put out, sort of newspaper ads saying, you're not allowed to trade crypto. And Vodafone, even in the UK, told Safaricom, do not allow any cryptocurrencies to connect to our system. Anyone who has any Bitcoin related aspects, you must remove them from the network. Because remember, Vodafone had a stake in Safaricom. Right. And by the way, Vodafone licensed their tech to Safaricom, right? Because remember, that's how they got started, right? Almost 15 years ago. So I wanted to get it back. And now we're at 200 million plus wallets. When you combine across all those networks, Airtel, Tigo, Safaricom, Vodafone, it's a huge, and it actually solves a lot of problems, right? So, because remember, you don't need a smartphone for this. You can use a feature phone. So even in the middle of rural Tanzania or rural Kenya, you can use a feature phone over a very basic USSD SMS to do transactions. So the key thing is, what does Cash App or any of these over-the-top services add to what people can already do in Africa, right? I think the only major thing is actually being able to hold value beyond local currency, be able to transact globally. it's almost like a global mobile money. That's kind of the major difference. And so I just wanted to add that context. About to what Carlos was saying about who is to watch, the Chinese are to watch for sure, because as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, again, Vodacom partnered up with Alibaba to launch VodaPay in South Africa, which is a kind of a reboot of trying to do the similar thing in South Africa. Because in Nigeria and South Africa, it's been slow to adopt because banks have been much more powerful there to kind of push out the mobile money networks. So we're going to see another battle brewing here. Thanks, I'm done speaking. Sorry for the rant. I wanted to give you real context on how it works.
Beautifully done, Mabona. I have a question for you.
I love your rants, man.
Yeah, man.
Rants.
I would pay for these rants, Mabona. So by the way, follow Mabona. He's clearly a gift to this app, and a gift to anybody who's thinking about Africa from a tech perspective, as I am, and I imagine I'm not alone in this room. And here's my question. And I have a lot, but just for right now, this issue of Africa country, like the Tanzania headline today and the Nigerian headline in the past 24 hours. Nigeria saying they're going to do a central bank digital currency. Tanzania saying we're interested in crypto. Who do you think it's possible another African country will step up in the next 2, 3, 4 days and make a statement that they also want to get into Bitcoin? And if so, which one do you think it would be?
I think there'll be a number of others. I think Kenya's already said they're exploring. So I think there's a difference between saying that we're going to work with cryptocurrencies and explore them versus we're going to launch our own EC, like was mentioned with Ghana, right, which is more of a central digital currency. And I've learned a lot, by the way, from folks like Ame, Alexandra, and others. So I'm kind of, combining a number of things. I mean, I was really confused about what CBD was, central digital currencies, and then I realized that, oh my God, mobile money is kind of that already because it's basically a digital form of it's kind of you're already going cashless that way, right? But yeah, so I think Kenya will probably announce. I wouldn't be surprised if Zimbabwe steps up again because they were kind of close and they already have a currency issue. It's very similar to El Salvador in that they have a lot of problems economically, and so and the president there is desperate for foreign investment. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if Zimbabwe and a few and Kenya step up again. Maybe even places like South Sudan, right? Where they just want to get on the map and get right on this wave. But I think what Messi said about Ethiopia is super interesting, right? I think Ethiopia, and by the way, Jack also has been to Ethiopia, by the way. He had a great time there too. Yeah. Let's not forget his tour was Ghana, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and he loves Ethiopia from what I heard. And so Ethiopia, I think, is super interesting because it's completely green field, as was mentioned. Like with Messi, there's no incumbent Safaricom Vodafone yet. So I would love to be a fly on the wall on the Ethiopian government, think about how they're going to sell these stakes, because it's how many people in Ethiopia? I think it's 100 million, right, Messi? 120 maybe.
Jesus. And by the way,
120. It's not a small country.
By the way, they just sold the one license to Safaricom in consortium with, Vodafone and CDC, the British CDC.
I had a really funny, Messi, I have a really funny story for you in Ethiopia. When I visited about 3 years ago, there was an innovation conference, right? And thanks to Ethiopian Airlines, they flew me in from DC, no problem, to be a speaker. We had Jake Bright from TechCrunch there as well. And I remember when we were there, I went to the MTN mobile stand, huge MTN mobile stand to get a SIM card because I didn't have anything from Ethiopia. And there was a team of like 20 people from South Africa, MTN, the biggest mobile carrier in Africa. And I was expecting them to, hand me a poster and sign up for a SIM card. They had nothing. They've been waiting for, I think, 5 or 6 years for the license, right? They were just there to show face. And but this was like 3 years ago, and only as mentioned by Messi, only literally last week, started handing out licenses. So I think the Ethiopian government's been playing a really interesting game of taking all the bids and all the interests, but then they're launching their own Telebur, and then maybe talking behind the scenes with Jack Dorsey and others, so how to connect over crypto. But yeah, Ethiopia has been one of my places I'm watching very, very carefully. And you'll see me there soon, Messi. Can't wait to connect.
Please partner with me. I'm building equity crowdfunding, and I just come here. Yay!
I want to welcome Simon. What's going on in Joburg, Simon, in South Africa?
Yeah, hi. Good evening. Yeah, no, Umbuan and I do the kind of the thing that we try and make sure that the people in the West really understand what Africa's about. So I think Umbuan did a great job just now. I just wanted to point out that question about who's the next country. I just tweeted it on the Tech News Around the World Twitter account about the South African Reserve Bank, which is the central bank in South Africa, saying how they're going to have a structured and I think but basically, they are moving. They recognize that crypto is going to be something they've got to look at. And about 2 days ago, I also put it on the Twitter on your Twitter account about someone has done a survey, and they found out that Africa's the continent with the highest amount of, or the highest, I can't remember, value or numbers of crypto transactions. So it's certainly it's going to be an interesting place to be here for the next year or so.
Mm-hmm. I just found your
folks are
tweet.
not hodling in Africa. They're transferring more than they are in the West. So that's what I think the major difference is, that the transfers peer to peer are more in Africa than versus hodling in the West. You're buying as a security, right?
Yep, and I just retweeted your tweet, Simon, to our ever-growing list of very beautiful Twitter followers. Just about to hit 2,700, and we're adding about 100 a day. Really super beautiful, intelligent people who follow that Twitter account. And by the way, a very beautiful audience here on stage, and you too can be beautiful and smart and healthy and successful by following the Tech News Club. Just click on the title.
Did my hair grow back today?
Say again?
Did my hair grow back today? Did I get some synthetic news out there?
That you bring up an interesting point, Faraz. There is a downside to not joining Tech News every day as your hair starts to fall out, as Faraz is mentioning. But if you do join us every day, you will not only grow a fuller head of hair, people are reporting you can actually lose a few pounds and even grow a few inches. And it's quite remarkable what's happening to some of the regulars here that join us every day. But go ahead. I just retweeted out your article, Simon, that South Africa will regulate crypto assets in a phased and structured manner. And what we were discussing is the possibility or the potential that Africa could play a critical, important role in manifesting this messianic future of a decentralized Bitcoin where countries start trading it with each other. Now that El Salvador has accepted it as its legal tender, I guess it only requires one other country to do the same before those two countries could start trading in Bitcoin with each other. And then a very interesting set of dominoes could begin to fall.
Tyler, it might be worth noting that none of these countries are talking about Ethereum or any other shitcoin in this, by the way.
True. And in fact, there's been a couple of countries that are now coming out very strongly against them. Was it Thailand today? The Security Exchange Commission of Thailand just ruled out, illegalized all shitcoins and NFTs. Jonathan.
Tyler, can I just ask a question?
Go ahead, Sylvan.
And I hope that Ben would be able to answer. I heard with a huge amount of interest Elizabeth Warren's recent hearings in the Senate. And she made an extraordinary claim about the amount of energy consumed per transaction. Now, it's a question that I've never really thought about a lot. And trying to do some research. I'm just wondering if Ben or anyone can actually say with some certainty how much of energy is consumed per Bitcoin transaction.
I don't.
So look, yes, you can easily calculate that. Firstly, the energy doesn't matter; the carbon output matters. 50 megatons a year, and easy to drop by just banning dirty mining. Just stop it, and the network will adjust itself automatically. There are approximately 7 to 10 transactions a second. So it's very easy to do the calculation now. So you've got 50 megatons a year divided by, say, call it 7 transactions a second. There you go. There's your carbon output per transaction. Forget the energy; doesn't matter. We have more energy than we ever need on the planet. What we don't want to do is put any more carbon in the atmosphere. So simple: close down the dirty mining, let the network automatically adjust within 2 weeks, as it will, as it has done several times recently, and carry on.
The reason that I asked this question is because I tried to do. It's quite important to actually have some layperson's benchmarks, if you like. And I tried to find some of those benchmarks. And one of the benchmarks, for instance, for the UK said that per Bitcoin transaction, it's like boiling a kettle in the UK for 27 years. And I it's very difficult to get a simple benchmark calculation that says, compared to current, for instance, using your Barclaycard in an ATM versus, a single Bitcoin transaction. And I think that will be quite informative for a lot of people, particularly for.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. I think you can answer.
Well, so firstly, it's relatively easy to get a good estimate. The Cambridge Judge Business School study of the total power consumption will tell you what the total power consumption is. I don't recall exactly what it is right now in terawatts, but you just divide that by the number of transactions. As I'm telling you, the number of transactions per second is roughly fixed at 7. So these calculations are very easy to do, but the power doesn't matter. We can do. I'll quickly, in the next 2 minutes, I'll work that out for you in terms of how long you boil a kettle for. But it doesn't really matter about the power. It does matter about the carbon. So the answer you're looking for is 50 megatons a year divided by 7 transactions a second.
Okay. Sir, can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So, sorry, just to take back a little bit. So someone just sent me, I think Ralph just sent me an article or something that the Quarry app I spoke about a few hours ago or minutes has just been deleted from Google Play Store, owned by a Nigerian politician, the Quarry app. And of course, like, it's everywhere now. I just saw the news.
And that was,
this is another twist to it, because
that was a competitor to Twitter in Nigeria, is it not?
Exactly. And
right.
the Google Play Store just deleted it from its app store. So
and why did they do that?
Another twist. So because of how, like, the Nigerian government has handled the whole Twitter issue, what happened was a lot of people were on reporting the Quarry app, right? Because a lot of people postulated that because of this that Twitter is being banned, and because of the privacy policy that people were not sure of, right? They say, you, the government, you're going to use that data against us, and because of that, a lot of people went to report the app on Google Play Store, different reports. So I'm guessing the reports will be part of the reason why Google, maybe the report reached like maximum amount and they took it down. I love those stuff. But it's interesting to see how this turns out at the end of the day, like looking at the whole drama unfold.
Here's a question for you. Is Twitter still in the App Store in Nigeria?
Yes. Twitter is still in App Store and the Google Play Store. However, you can't access it. So what people do now is that they use VPN to access it.
Right.
Right now, you see most Nigerian.
I got you. But my point is that even if the government bans it, they can't stop Google and Apple from keeping it available for download in the App Store. They can't stop people from downloading it, is my question, right?
Exactly. Twitter is still on the App Store.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting, because we started this session 2 or 3 hours ago by talking about there was a headline where a young lady was selling shoes and watches and things on a social media app. I'm trying to remember which one, Instagram or something. And then, and it was in Nigeria, and she's selling it on Twitter. She has a business selling things, and she uses Twitter to sell her things. And now that Twitter's been banned in Nigeria, the very first headline that we read 3 hours ago was that now that Twitter is banned in Nigeria, her business is greatly impacted. That she makes her living essentially off of Twitter, of selling her things. And that's super, super, super interesting, because more and more Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all of these things and even Netflix are now adding e-commerce to their apps in what is being called social commerce. And even Mark Zuckerberg, in his own Facebook post on his own Facebook profile 3 days ago, says we are now going to enable this vision of letting people make a living on Facebook, not a few dollars. Earn a living were his exact words, which implies a substantial income And here's what he really means is that there are 1 million shops in the world that are not on Amazon. And don't it doesn't make sense for them to be on Amazon. That's not Amazon, the part of the market they're addressing. And Facebook understands that's a huge opportunity, is to get every mom and pop shop on Facebook and Instagram in the same way they got your mom and pop on Facebook. So now that they get every mom and pop shop on Facebook selling all kinds of stuff and using all of the influencers on Instagram to drive traffic to the mom and pop shops on Instagram and on Facebook, that's a tremendously huge $1 trillion social market, social e-commerce thing happening. But what happens now that Twitter also and TikTok also and even Netflix recently, all in the past week, have announced they're now going to add these e-commerce features to their platforms, and people are going to start opening their businesses on these social media apps. And what happens when a government like Nigeria banning Twitter, it's not no longer just banning people from communicating, it's banning businesses from existing by banning that app. Because now it's an e-commerce app, not just a communication app. And you just shut down 100, 200, 300,000 businesses by banning that app, right? Now it's a whole, but what happens when the platforms, as you just said, because this is truly interesting development, Google and Apple being the app stores, which dictate which apps can exist in those stores, play an even more powerful role. Because what if Google doesn't like what Nigeria is doing with Nigeria's own, as you said, their version of Twitter, which is friendly with the government? It's like the brother of the president or something like that, who's built this Twitter in Nigeria. And now the Google store or the Apple store say, yeah, you know what? We don't like that app for whatever reason. And now it's gone. People can't even download it, even if they wanted to. It doesn't exist anymore. It essentially doesn't exist. And Google and Apple are the essential digital dictators that determine what consumers even have access to. They are the marketplace. That gets really, really interesting from a geopolitical friction perspective, because if India says, we don't like Twitter anymore, we're banning Twitter, and Google and Apple are like, no, not really. You can download it. You just need a VPN. Oh, by the way, here's a VPN you could download. Oh, and by the way, Twitter is going to include a VPN directly in their app next time just to get around it. But what if Google or Apple were to say, start picking apps that the government likes that they don't like? Or America tells Google, as they have done, America told Google, you can no longer do anything with Huawei in China. Matter of fact, Huawei's phones are using Google Android. Nah, they can't have that either anymore. Fuck that. Game over. Scorched earth. Fuck them. No more Android for Huawei phones. Game over. So Huawei had to make their whole new own operating system, just to highlight what can happen when a government, America, tells its tech companies, Google and Apple, you know what? All of those new apps that India is making, their own versions of Facebook and Google and Apple or competing social media apps, fuck them. Don't list them in the store. And as much as India is trying to replace the American tech companies in their own geography, America says, no, we're not playing that way. You're going to have to ban Google and Apple if you want to see that through. And good luck getting a country to ban Google. Which, by the way, just to highlight how difficult it might be to ban Google in the very near future, Google's laying the pipes of the internet between the oceans. All of the latest actual physical pipes that are being laid across the Atlantic and the Pacific, guess who's laying those cables? Facebook and Google. And so what happens when a country says, okay, I guess if we don't like Twitter, we really want to ban Twitter, we actually have to tell the Google App Store, hey, Google, you either stop making Twitter available or we're going to ban Google too. And Google's like, oh, really? Because we control the internet to your whole country. So who's banning who exactly?
It's crazy from here on, to be honest, and it's really interesting to see how this plays out between Nigeria, Twitter, and of course Google, just as you've mentioned. And now just to add a little bit of spice to it. So you know that the Twitter ban came at the backdrop of the deletion of Buhari's tweets, right? And funnily, Facebook did the same to his post. So the question has been, why then were you quick to say, you know what, we are deleting Twitter, but hey, you didn't have problems with Facebook for deleting your post? So is it as a function of, okay, because Nigerian public gather more on Twitter than on Facebook for political banter and all of those, or is it because maybe Facebook is a bigger company, or it's really dodgy from here on, and it's really interesting looking at how this will work at the end of the day.
Tyler, one more thing. Just let me bring in another perspective. When Zuckerberg actually says that, you know, they're going to be providing the platform where people would be able to earn living. You know, if you look at all these countries like Malaysia, Nigeria, Egypt, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, you know, the earning living means like $15-20 is going to be more than enough for me for a day. So they actually live, you know, the lower segment of the society actually live on $2 a day. So when you're talking about $10-15 a day, and that easily can be earned on the Facebook. So let me give you an example. Some of the ladies have started business in Pakistan where they actually go live on the Facebook, because going live on Facebook is just clicking a button, and they would go through the, you know, the ladies' clothing they have in the stock, and they say, oh, this is cotton, this is Falalan, this is like this material, look, how does it look? And just live reporting about their stock. And they give out their WhatsApp numbers, and they say, oh, here's the number, you just make an order right now, it's 1,000 rupees. And, you know, here you go, orders starts to come in, and they dispatch it, and the whole thing is on cash on delivery. So this thing goes in, and then, you know, the cash is being given and is half the price as compared to the market. So there is a huge economy actually just on this e-commerce thing, which is very unconventional as compared to the people actually going onto the website and making an order and having a merchant account linked with it, which there's no merchant account in those countries where you can have a gateway, and the vast majority of people, like over 90%, doesn't have a credit card or debit card. So there is a huge economy has been built over the time because of all these platforms. And also another thing have to keep in mind that, you know, all these YouTuber economy. So for instance, some of the countries actually, it happened to Pakistan and it happened to briefly in India as well, that, you know, YouTube be banned for like a day or two, or like it was longer period of time in Pakistan, by the way. But all these people who are earning great money because of like millions of, you know, being watched their videos millions of times, simply put so much pressure on their respective governments when something like that happens, or some sort of ban discussion start to happen, they just simply can't do it because there's so much internal pressure that's going to be end up losing so much money, and all these people are going to be on the streets. So that's another angle of public pressure, that, you know, once it gets to a, you know, this level where there is a sizable number is dependent on that, their living is dependent on that, is simply not possible for the government to actually just say, okay, from tomorrow we're going to be banning it. Thank you for this.
Yeah. Heyman.
Tyler, can I just say something?
Not yet. Nope, not right now. Heyman, are you still in the room, or did you just go open your new room? Are you there, Heyman? Heyman.
Heyman's not here. He's not
okay,
here.
I hope.
Yeah, Heyman's not here.
Okay, he's opening his new room. So we're going to move over to Heyman's room as soon as Faraz makes his comment, and I have a couple of headlines to end on. Go ahead, Faraz.
So in that case, please continue on the headlines. I don't want to stop the pace of the room. It wasn't that important what I was going to say.
Okay, so a few quick headlines that we didn't get to cover. One that just broke just now that is huge and plays right into this conversation. Stripe, the biggest fintech company in the world, has now added ID verification. What they call, the headline is, Stripe goes beyond payments with Stripe Identity. This, and Ben and the crypto folks know just how important this concept is. Stripe Identity to provide AI-based ID verification for transactions and much more. A number of startups have fashioned themselves as the Stripe for identity verification. Today, Stripe is stepping in to fill that need itself. The company is launching a new product called Stripe Identity, a self-serve tool that companies can use to verify user identities, with Stripe managing the customer data in an encrypted format using computer vision and machine learning, You heard that right. Computer vision. Why would they need computer vision? Well, that's where shit gets really interesting very quickly. And we could talk about this literally for an hour. And in fact, we should, and we will tomorrow. So go ahead and read the article and bring your thoughts tomorrow, because I'll leave you with this thought. We talk about the big tech companies versus governments and how that would all shake down now that Google and Facebook actually are laying the actual pipes between the oceans and actually are the actual internet in some of these countries. And not only are they the physical pipes, but they are more and more becoming the medical data in these countries. They have incredibly ambitious plans to take over the medical industries, which includes all of the medical data of all of the people, right? As they should. It's a huge opportunity. I would do the same. You'd be crazy not to. But they're going to do it in a way that it's going to make the medical world shake because of all of the amazing data they will be collecting from the Apple Watch we just mentioned 30 minutes ago, to name one of many devices where they will collect all kinds of data that will blow your mind, with the phones and the cameras and the microphones, etc., yada, yada, yada. And the identity that Stripe is talking about is going to become a much bigger role, where these apps are going to be able to, you're going to build your businesses now on Facebook and on Google. You're going to build your identity as part of these and all your medical data as part of it and all of that. And now good luck telling that company that has that much control of your citizens to get out of town, because they start to become more integrated in your citizens than you are as a country. And if they had to, if there was an island they could swim to that was Google or Facebook Island, they almost certainly would. So it gets very interesting indeed. And it gets back to the question, which country will Amazon or Google buy first? So we will end on that note, and we will head over to our friend Heyman's room.
His room is nice and open. His room is ready for us.
We will see you over there. Thank you to everybody for